Chapter 521. To Lu Yin, Mira was his benefactor. If it weren't for her, the trial on Earth might not have been fair. She had also helped him many times, which was why the Wen family had invited her. Unfortunately, Lu Yin could not control this mountain range. He was just a puppet, and the mountain range was truly under the Sea King's control. Wendy Yushan's eyes flashed when she saw Mira appear. Mira soared into the air, her feet sparkling like white jade. She was more than 10 centimeters above the dark red ground, and her long white hair fell to her waist. A refreshing fragrance wafted about her, and she smiled at Lu Yin. "You still came." Lu Yin nodded and pointed at the sky. "I didn't want to." Myra's eyes lit up. Although the Innerverse and Outerverse are wary of the Sea King's dome, they are not afraid. The Sea King's dome's existence is just a point that disrupts the balance, and it is not a colossus that can crush the Innerverse and Outerverse. "If you are willing, I can represent the Wen family and formally offer to protect you in Frostwave Weave." "Hey, white-haired ghost, what did you say?" Hai Chi was unhappy. Although she had not participated in Lu Yin's scheme to steal the pyrolite, she would not allow anyone to slander the Sea King's dome and ruin her plans. Mira smiled at Hai Chi. "Daughter of the Sea King, will you marry him?" Hai Chi's face turned red. Who would marry him? "I won't. If you don't marry him, then his status as the Sea King's son-in-law will never be confirmed. How long can the Sea King's dome protect Frostwave Weave? I don't want to be disrespectful to Senior Sea King, but from what I know, he's already very old." Hai Chi's face sank and she stared at Mira. "You have no right to judge my father." Mira bowed to Hai Chi. "I wouldn't dare be disrespectful to Senior Sea King, but I'm just speaking the truth. Please forgive me if I've offended you." Hai Chi snorted and turned to leave. Lu Yin frowned. How could he not know this? Was the Sea King really that old? Did Mira mean that the Sea King was nearing the end of the year? Hai Chi's reaction also confirmed this point. His eyes flickered. Myra's lips curled up as she smiled at Lu Yin. "This is the second time that Arbiter Wen has extended an invitation to you, and it's also the most sincere one. With the Wen family's abilities, we're more than capable of protecting Frostwave Weave. The Sea King's dome will not interfere in the struggles of the Innerverse and Outerverse, so you don't have to worry about them doing anything to you. As for the Sword Sect and the Day-Night clan, the Wen family will naturally deal with them." Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin looked at her and smiled. "Miss Mira, I've always been grateful for your help. Unfortunately, I'll have to disappoint you this time." Mira sighed. "Looks like I'm not a qualified lobbyist." "No, it's just that the situation is very clear, and even the best lobbyist would be useless," Lu Yin said. She looked at him seriously. "Can you tell me the reason?" Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. "Since ancient times, there has never been an invincible power. The Wen family is powerful, but they also have their own enemies. Frostwave Weave cannot afford to offend anyone who can oppose the Wen family." Mira nodded. "That's right." She then smiled at Lu Yin. "You've matured. Since that's the case, the next time we meet we might be enemies." Lu Yin shrugged. "I won't be too ruthless against you." Mira covered her mouth and giggled. "You're really confident. However, your enemy might not be me. Perhaps it's Arbiter Wen." Lu Yin's gaze turned cold, but he did not say anything. Mira waved a hand and then turned to leave. What did she mean by that? Why would Arbiter Wen become your enemy? Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin in confusion. Lu Yin was also thinking about it. With his current status, Arbiter Wen would definitely not become his enemy. There were only two possibilities. The first was that Arbiter Wen had either been the one to judge the case when the tragedy with the surname Lu had been discovered, or he was on good terms with one of the 10 arbiters. The second possibility was that the Wen family had already made preparations to become enemies with the Sea King's dome. Both possibilities were possible, and Lu Yin watched Mira head towards Pyrolite Lake with complicated thoughts. He did not know which possibility he was leaning towards. He had always treated the 10 arbiters as imaginary enemies, and the closer he got to them, the more he could feel how terrifying they were. Up until now, he had only seen Wen Sansi take action, and he had blocked Yao Gu, who was on the Astral Beast Domain's Skymender list. Furthermore, he had severely injured Ming Zhaotian on Shenwu continent and almost destroyed the 5 sealing planets. That kind of strength had shocked Lu Yin, and it definitely surpassed that of an ordinary hunter. Sooner or later Lu Yin would be able to find out who the 10 arbiters were. When that time came, would he be able to defeat that arbiter one? What kind of power was behind that arbiter? Suddenly Lu Yin felt a sense of urgency. As his reputation grew, the outside world would investigate him in greater detail, and that tragedy would be uncovered sooner or later. At that time he would no longer have the initiative, and it was very likely that he would be ambushed by that arbiter one. He might even be targeted right now. What are you thinking about? Why is your face so pale? Wendy Yushan frowned and looked at Lu Yin in confusion. Lu Yin looked at her. I'm thinking about when I'll be able to catch up to the 10 arbiters. Wendy Yushan's expression changed and she looked up into the sky. I once challenged one of the 10 arbiters. The one you followed? Lu Yin could not help but ask. Wendy Yushan nodded and her eyes flashed with reminiscence. That was the first time I issued a challenge after I became 18th on the top 100 rankings. Lu Yin looked at her. I couldn't even draw my sword, but it collapsed. Wendy Yushan lowered her head and looked at her sword. Her words made Lu Yin's heart skip a beat. You didn't even have a chance to draw your sword? Lu Yin did not believe her. Even if he faced an ordinary Lemaitre, as long as that Lemaitre had the slightest bit of strength, it was impossible for him to not even have a chance to draw his sword. Wendy Yushan smiled bitterly. He gave me a chance to draw my sword, but I still couldn't do it. Under his strength, everything was suppressed. Who is he? Lu Yin asked. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin. He's from the 10 Arbiters' Spirit Palace. People call him White Knight. Lu Yin's eyes widened. Spirit Palace? Someone from the Lingling clan? Wendy Yushan nodded. The Lingling clan's most talented and oppressive powerhouse since ancient times. Up until now, Lu Yin had already learned the names of 4 of the 10 arbiters. Scholar Wen Sansi, Night King Zhenwu, Divine Fist Lon Si and White Knight Spirit Palace. As for the other 6, he knew of 1 from the Sword Sect, 1 from the Phoenix family and 1 from the War King. You should know all of the 10 arbiters, right? Lu Yin asked. Wendy Yushan nodded. That's one thing, but I can't tell you. This is an agreement between the 10 arbiters. Their names can only be found through their own abilities and it cannot be revealed by others. When you find out all of their names on your own, perhaps then you'll have the right to speak with them. Lu Yin fell silent. The 10 arbiters used this method to maintain their authority and mystery, as well as to encourage the younger generation. Of course, if you want to know, I can tell you. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin, her eyes bright. Lu Yin rolled his eyes. Forget it. Wendy Yushan turned away and stopped talking. So what about the White Knight? Lu Yin finally asked, especially since the title of the 10 arbiters, White Knight, was too coquettish, and it made him feel inexplicably unhappy. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin with a puzzled expression. Lu Yin coughed. That's right. What's his personality like? Also, how are you getting along with him? Wendy Yushan was still puzzled. What do you mean? Lu Yin blinked. He couldn't just ask that person if he had any thoughts about her, right? He was conflicted for a long time. Judging from Wendy Yushan's appearance, she probably didn't understand much about relationships and was only focused on her cultivation. Helpless, Lu Yin said, nothing. He then turned around and left. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin's back and pondered for a moment. Then a strange expression appeared on her face, and there was even an indescribable smile on her face. Half a month passed once again. During this time very few explorers descended, and even if they did so in secret, not daring to be discovered by Lu Yin. The various great powers were still rather vigilant about Lu Yin's ability to strip star essence skins. During this half a month, the pyrolite mines in many places had been completely extracted, and the battles grew more intense. The pyrolite mines in Pyrolite Mountain, Pyrolite Lake and Pyrolite Plains were nearing completion, and a new round of battles was brewing. No one dared to provoke the mountain range that Lu Yin was overseeing. In outer space, in the distant Starfall Sea, the Sea King's dome was as bustling as ever, and a constant stream of spacecraft docked at the harbor. On this day, an old man arrived at the harbor aboard a merchant ship from the Sea King's dome. The old man's face was ruddy and his white beard reached his knees. He wore a long white robe without a single blemish, and he held a wooden cane in his hand that supported his hunched back as he stepped onto the land of the Sea King's dome. How many years has it been? Is this the place? My memories are blurry. The old man sighed ruefully as he looked at the Sea King's dome. Behind him, a young man impatiently pushed the old man away, almost pushing him over. "Old man, hurry up and leave. Don't block the way." The old man supported himself with his cane and looked at the young man's back with a faint smile. "Even on the path of cultivation you still need to respect your elders. As a punishment for your rudeness, you're not allowed to use star energy for the next 10 years. The moment he finished speaking, the young man who had been walking in front of the old man suddenly froze, and his face turned deathly pale as he looked at his hands in horror. "Where's my star energy? Where's my star energy? Why is it gone?" He yelled frantically. The star energy in his body was gone, and he couldn't sense any outside star energy at all. What was going on? What had happened? The young man grabbed a passerby and yelled at him, but the passerby easily tossed him into the sea. A person without star energy would have their cultivation future destroyed. In the Sea King's dome, any random passerby could surpass this young man in terms of strength. The old man didn't look at the young man again as he walked towards the teleportation device at the Sea King's dome. At the highest level of the Sea King's dome, the Sea King opened his eyes. Earlier than expected. He then vanished. The old man entered the teleportation device, which sent people to the waist of the Sea King's dome. However, the old man did not appear at the teleportation device there. Instead, he appeared at the highest level right in front of the Sea King. The old man was not surprised and his murky eyes suddenly became clear. He looked at the Sea King and slowly said, "You finally made me appear." Chapter 522. The Sea King looked at the old man indifferently. "I didn't invite you. Was it the head inquisitor's idea to come to the Starfall Sea, or was it someone else's?" The old man smiled. "If I said that it was the head inquisitor's idea, you would have chased me out." The Sea King sneered. "He didn't dare to come himself, so he sent you here to be scolded." The old man sighed. "I have no right to ask about the grudges between the two of you. You should know why I'm here. Tell me the truth so that I can report back." The Sea King narrowed his eyes and stared at the old man seriously. "I can tell you, but no more than 3 people can know about this, especially the 2 who are as famous as you." The old man nodded. "I promise you." The Sea King stared at the old man for a while before retracting his gaze. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. "I'm older than all of you, and this universe can no longer hold me." The old man trembled and he looked at the Sea King in disbelief. "What do you mean?" The Sea King raised a hand. "My power is declining." The old man's expression was solemn. The Sea King lowered his hand and looked into the distance. "As long as I'm alive, no one will dare to provoke the Sea King's dome, and no one will dare to casually step into the Starfall Sea. But if I die, who will protect this place?" "So you want to use pyrolite to protect the Sea King's dome?" The old man stared at the Sea King. The Sea King was helpless. "Pyrolite can only serve as a deterrent. A powerhouse like you won't care about it at all, or else the Hall of Honor wouldn't have allowed it to happen. However, pyrolite can at least prevent any troublemakers from harassing us. That's enough. Sometimes troublemakers are even harder to deal with." The old man fell into deep thought. The Sea King did not speak. After a while, the old man said with difficulty, "I believe you. I can also promise that I will do my best to protect the Sea King's dome. I only hope that you won't lie to me." The Sea King replied, "Thank you." The old man left in the blink of an eye, leaving the Starfall Sea behind. It seemed that he had only taken the merchant ship to sightsee the Starfall Sea. After the old man left, a figure appeared beside the Sea King. It was the Sea King's eldest son, Hai Feng. "Father, who was that?" "The Hall of Honor's Interstellar Arbitration's head, Mu En," the Sea King replied. Seabreeze was shocked. "The presiding judge has actually come personally. This situation is even more serious than we thought." The Sea King was cold and arrogant. "You're wrong. His appearance was within my expectations. Anyone who wants to negotiate with me has to be at least at his level, but it's fortunate that he's here. If it was the head judge, then things would have been troublesome. I have some grudges with that old man, so there's no need to talk when he shows up." "Mu En already believes your words. Does that mean the Hall of Honor is no longer an obstacle?" Seabreeze asked. The Sea King sneered. The Interstellar Arbitration Institute's 3 presiding judges and 1 head inquisitor aren't stupid. They'll have a backup plan. Then are you still insisting on this matter? The Sea King's expression was solemn. From now on you don't need to know about this anymore. The less you know the better. Hai Feng still wanted to say something. The Sea King looked up. The falsehood of this universe must be torn apart, or else there will never be a day where we can rise again. Regardless of whether it's right or wrong, I'll bear the responsibility alone. Whether I, the Sea King, will be spurned or worshipped in 10,000 years will depend on fate. In outer space, Muin put down his gadget and looked back at the Starfall Sea. He had to give face to the Sea King. Since the Sea King wanted pyrolite, then whether or not it was for that reason, these old fellows could not interfere. In that case, there would be no problem with a reasonable competition. Who knew if the younger generation of the Innerverse and Outerverse would be able to stop those from the Neoverse? The Sea King's guess was correct. The Hall of Honor had prepared for both sides. They had long since selected a group of experts from the Neoverse to head to planet Pyrolite to participate in the competition for Pyrolite and prevent it from being snatched away by the Sea King's dome. However, neither the Hall of Honor nor the Sea King could have imagined that the group of experts who had headed to the Innerverse from the Neoverse were still in the Cosmic Sea. They had gotten lost. The Neoverse had to pass through the Cosmic Sea to reach the Innerverse, and most of the safe routes there were controlled by the 4 pirate lords. This time the group of experts wanted to use Leon's Armada's route to reach the Innerverse. According to the original plan, it would take at most half a month for them to reach the Innerverse. However, it had already been a month since that group of experts had set off, which was when Lu Yin had exposed his identity and occupied the mountain range. Now, a month had passed and they were still in the Cosmic Sea. Above the Cosmic Sea, a battleship was drifting. Lightning filled the sky as waves swept past. On the battleship, more than 10 Neoverse experts stared at the Cosmic Sea with gloomy expressions. Leon's Armada still hasn't found their way. They're definitely doing this on purpose. They're deliberately delaying us from entering the Innerverse. Those Innerverse trash are afraid that we'll appear. That shouldn't be the case. They're looking for Leon's Armada because Heizage Leon is the Pirate King. He doesn't have any connections with the Innerverse's great powers, so he can't possibly help them. But how do we explain this? Leon's Armada has dominated the Cosmic Sea for so many years, but they've actually gotten lost. Even an idiot would know that something is wrong. Are you calling me an idiot? Lightning flashed past, illuminating the battleship and a sinister-looking man. Who are you blaming for jumping out? Someone across from the man lowered their head and sneered. Bright, shut up. A crisp voice rang out as a bolt of lightning suddenly struck the battleship, igniting a huge fire that illuminated the speaker. It was a beautiful woman with an indescribable coldness and arrogance in her eyes. No matter what, we'll leave this matter to the higher-ups. They'll naturally negotiate with Leon's Armada. The fire was quickly extinguished and the battleship sank into darkness once more. Elsewhere, at the bow of the ship, 2 figures faced each other. The Hall of Honor trusts Leon's Armada, which is why we paid the price to have you lead the way. However, you intentionally caused us to get lost. The Hall of Honor will not let this matter slide, and the Interstellar Court will not sit idly by. The other figure sighed. How many times do we have to repeat ourselves? We're really lost. The Cosmic Sea is huge and it changes every year. Today's changes are a little exaggerated, and even we haven't found a better direction. You should trust Leon's Armada's integrity. You want me to trust a pirate's integrity? It looks like you want to provoke Leon's Armada. Who gave you the guts? The Interstellar Court? Or the Hall of Honor itself? The Cosmic Sea is not your backyard. You better watch your words. Alright, just you wait. This matter isn't over. Soon, only one person remained at the bow of the ship and he sneered, "How could I let you cause trouble for little Ian?" A few days later, in the Starfall Sea, the sky suddenly darkened at the Sea King's dome. Everyone looked up and felt a heavy pressure. The Sea King looked up and curiously looked into the distance. Why is he here? Thousands of kilometers away from the Sea King's dome, a figure stood high in the sky. He was 3 meters tall and wielded a giant blade as he faced the ocean currents. As the ocean currents roared past, the figure raised his blade and slashed down. The ripples spread far and wide, and even old freaks with power levels in the hundreds of thousands would be afraid of being split in two. It was boundlessly terrifying, and the powerful force caused the nearby planets to tremble. Even the powerhouses with power levels over 300,000 were trembling. Xianxia, are you trying to show off in the Starfall Sea? The Sea King's trident pierced through the void. The figure looked up and grinned. It was Xianxia. Long time no see, old man. He then slashed out with his Overlord blade, which collided with the Sea King's trident. The entire Starfall Sea seemed to tremble, and everyone's minds felt heavy. The Sea King's trident was knocked back and landed in the Sea King's hands. The Sea King held the weapon and faced Xianxia. What are you doing in the Starfall Sea? Xianxia pointed his blade at the Sea King. Let me ask you a question. What do you want with Pyrolite? The Sea King raised his brows. That's none of your business. When did you become the Hall of Honor's lackey? Xianxia spat. The Hall of Honor has nothing to do with me. I'm just curious, so I came to ask. The Sea King was furious. Are you crazy? Pyrolite isn't a threat to you or me. Why did you come to the Starfall Sea just for this? Xianxia looked up. That's right. Hurry up and answer me. What do you want with Pyrolite? The Sea King was furious. That's none of your business. Xianxia snorted. I haven't fought in a long time. My hands are itching. Come on. The Sea King stabbed out with his spear. Come. For 2 consecutive days the Starfall Sea trembled. Countless people were stunned, and even the Greyweed continent, which was second only to the Sea King's dome, did not dare to watch the battle. The entire Starfall Sea was the battlefield between Xianxia and the Sea King. 2 days later the Starfall Sea regained its calm and Xianxia left. No one knew the outcome of the battle, as no one was able to approach the battlefield. News of what had happened in the Starfall Sea could not reach planet Pyrolite, as there was no network in the astral wilderness. However, even if news of the battle reached planet Pyrolite, Lu Yin and the others did not think too much about it. The Day-Night clan had finally sent a truly important person to the Starfall Sea, and their target was the mountain range. At almost the same time, the Ross Empire, the Blaze Realm, and the Dire Barbarian clan had joined forces and sent experts to the mountain range. 2 streaks of fiery red light approached from afar. Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan stood atop the mountain range while Hai Chi-Chi and the others were protected by Northgate Lai. Their expressions were solemn as they looked up into the sky. Above the planet, all of the great powers were watching. The hatch to the Day-Night clan spacecraft opened, and a skeletal hand appeared. Then a black-haired man walked out. He was so thin that he looked like a skeleton, and a single strand of gray hair stood out among his black and white hair. He was from the Night King clan. Countless people gasped when they saw this person. Night King Gu was ranked 15th on the top 100 rankings. The Day-Night clan had sent a true expert. The moment she saw Night King Gu, Wendy Yushan's gaze turned cold. She unsheathed her sword and a cold gleam illuminated the void. Lu Yin suddenly grabbed her arm, and under her puzzled gaze he solemnly said, "Unless it's a matter of life and death, don't use that. If the mountain range can't be defended, then so be it." Wendy Yushan's eyes flickered and she nodded before taking a step forward. Night King Gu's appearance caused everyone to overlook the other spacecraft. Even if someone had thought of it, they might not have cared. According to their calculations, the star essence skin that had been produced for such a long time could only support someone at Night King Gu's level. If the top 10 of the top 100 rankings wanted to enter planet Pyrolite, then it would take even longer to produce the star essence skin. In other words, the strongest person on planet Pyrolite was definitely Night King Gu. Thank you, Cyrus. Thanks for your support. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Chapter 523. Night King Gu did not care about the other spacecraft as he only glanced at it. That one glance was enough to determine the other's strength. It was a weakling. Sleeping young master was inside that spaceship. At that moment he was sleeping. Wendy Yushan appeared in front of Night King Gu. One was ranked 18th on the top 100 rankings while the other was ranked 15th. The difference did not seem that great, but Lu Yin could still see it with his eyes. Night King Gu's rune lines surpassed Wendy Yushan's. Without wasting any time, Night King Gu raised his skeletal face, and his sunken eyes flickered with a cold light. He suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of Wendy Yushan. He punched out, and at the same time a grayish-white stream of energy swept out. Lu Yin had seen a similar scene before. This was the Night King's body. Wendy Yushan slashed out with her sword, and the tip of her sword sank deep into the bone. The might of 10,000 swords in one broke through Night King's body, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. Instead, Wendy Yushan's entire body was smashed deep into the mountain range by Night King's punch. Countless people were shocked. Wendy Yushan had killed Zhanbing Day Knight with a single slash, which had been extremely powerful. However, such a slash was actually ineffective against Night King. It could not be said that it was ineffective as she had broken through Night King's defenses. However, this heavy defense was still not enough to harm him. Lu Yin used flash to appear behind Night King and struck out with a palm. Night King saw it, but he did not dodge and allowed Lu Yin to strike him. 30 stacks 70 tenfold shockwave palm. Boom. The ground cracked open and the two of them sank into the ground. Lu Yin's pupils shrank as his palm force could not break through the Night King's body. Night King turned around and looked at Lu Yin with cold eyes. He raised his left hand to grab at Lu Yin, but Lu Yin did not dare to let him grab him. He quickly retreated, but Night King was not slow either. Anyone with a powerful physical body would not be slow, and Night King chased after Lu Yin's retreat. His fist trembled, causing the space around it to collapse. Lu Yin felt his chest tighten, and just as he was about to use his fates, an sword chi swept out from beneath his feet and slashed towards Night King. Night King's fist smashed downwards, colliding with the sword chi. There was a thump and shockwaves shot out in all directions, causing the void to scatter. Thunderous cracks in the void, and Night King's strike left a huge crater in the ground. Wendy Yushan leapt out and stood in front of Lu Yin, looking at Night King with a grave expression. Night King straightened his body, and his skeletal face sent a chill down everyone's spine. "Don't interfere. This person's attack isn't something you can block," Wendy Yushan whispered. Lu Yin looked at her seriously. "We definitely can't use that. At worst, we'll just give the mountain range to him. Even if we work together, we won't be able to defend the mountain range, and the Sea King won't be able to blame us." Wendy Yushan nodded, and then she turned her sword and swept it towards Night King. Night King's body distorted the void. He clearly did not have any muscles, but he gave off a feeling of unparalleled strength. This strength even caused Wendy Yushan's sword to become sluggish. Night King faced Wendy Yushan's sword, but he did not dodge at all. He allowed the sword to slice into his body as he struck out with a palm. Wendy Yushan's face changed as Night King's palm struck her abdomen. She spat out a mouthful of blood as her entire body was sent flying into the distance. Night King charged forward and punched out again. Wendy Yushan's eyes turned cold as she forcefully twisted her body to avoid Night King's attack. She then stabbed out with her sword and stabbed it into Night King's body. This time blood dripped down the blade. She had injured Night King, but Night King did not seem to care. He grabbed the sword with one hand and allowed it to slice into his palm while his other hand viciously swatted towards Wendy Yushan's forehead. If this attack connected, then Wendy Yushan would definitely die. Lu Yin appeared at the critical moment and kicked out with 6-line battle force wrapped around his leg. The enormous strength caused Night King to raise his eyebrows, and he had no choice but to redirect his palm strike towards Wendy Yushan to meet Lu Yin's attack head-on. Lu Yin's leg twisted, and then there was a cracking sound as his bones broke and his battle force collapsed. However, his strength had still forced Night King back by 2 steps, allowing Wendy Yushan to escape from certain death. Lu Yin crashed into the ground with a thump, and his right leg was bent at an irregular angle. Intense pain assaulted him, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. When he saw that Wendy Yushan had escaped danger, he finally relaxed. However, the pain from his broken right leg soon followed. Ever since he had embarked on the path of cultivation, he had rarely been at a disadvantage in terms of physical strength. Now he was facing Night King in a head-on clash of physical strength, and he had no way of retaliating. This was a super expert ranked 15th on the top 100 rankings. Fortunately, he had only broken his right leg, and this sort of injury would heal quickly. Lu Yin touched his cosmic ring. It seemed like it was time to use external items. Wendy Yushan appeared beside Lu Yin and crouched down to press a hand on his leg. Lu Yin was puzzled. "What's wrong? It's not that serious." Wendy Yushan did not reply. Blood dripped from the corner of her mouth, but her gaze was serious. Lu Yin saw a faint hazy halo emanate from her palm, and after that his right leg no longer hurt and it returned to normal. This was an innate gift of healing. Back at East San Dios, Lu Yin had guessed that Wendy Yushan might have an innate gift, but he had never expected her to be a healer. This sort of innate gift was 1 in 10,000, even among all cultivators with innate gifts. There was no need to elaborate further on the effects of healing. When Wendy Yushan had displayed her innate gift of healing, the various great powers in outer space had become envious. If a cultivator with a healing innate gift was present in a battle, it would greatly reduce the number of casualties, and it would also increase the chances of victory. Furthermore, such a cultivator with a healing innate gift would not be weak. "You can actually heal," Lu Yin exclaimed. Wendy Yushan stood up. "Alright, let's see how it goes." Lu Yin stood up and moved his right leg. He looked at Wendy Yushan in admiration. "I was wondering why the difference between you and that person was so huge. If you added in your healing innate gift, then the difference wouldn't be that great. You could even exhaust him to death." Wendy Yushan's expression turned serious and she turned to look at Night King Gu. "I won't exhaust him to death. He's very strong and the damage I inflicted on him was only because he wasn't willing to dodge. If he fought seriously then I might not have been able to hit him. What if I joined in?" Lu Yin asked. Wendy Yushan gripped her sword tightly. "Don't interfere. He's not someone you can touch." Across from her, Night King Gu stared coldly at Wendy Yushan. He clenched his bloodied hand and frowned. This woman was a little troublesome and he needed to end this quickly. With that thought in mind, Night King Gu charged towards Wendy Yushan, and a spiral of air erupted from his body. Wendy Yushan's expression changed and she slashed out with her sword. However, the edge of her sword was obstructed by the air currents, and by the time it touched Night King Gu, it was unable to break through his Night King's body. Night King Gu was afraid of Wendy Yushan's innate gift, so he was fighting seriously. Wendy Yushan's sword was ineffective, and she subconsciously moved to block in front of her. Night King Gu's fist slammed into the edge of her sword, causing it to distort. The shockwave that passed through the sword's edge shook Wendy Yushan, injuring her once again. She was sent flying into the distance like a meteor. Night King Gu charged forward again and appeared above Wendy Yushan's head. He clasped his hands together and viciously smashed down. He would not give Wendy Yushan any time to heal herself. However, Wendy Yushan was ranked in the top 20 of the top 100 rankings, so she would not be defeated so easily. Night King Gu's attack seemed heavy, but Wendy Yushan was still able to withstand it. She dodged to the side, causing Night King Gu's attack to miss and shatter the ground once again and distort the void. The two of them moved faster and faster and sword chi and fist winds collided, causing the surrounding void to collapse. Countless onlookers were shocked. Lu Yin narrowed his eyes and filled them with star energy. Others might not be able to see it, but he could clearly see that Wendy Yushan had been attacking more than defending at the start, but now she was attacking more than defending. She was on the verge of collapsing, and Night King Gu's continuous attacks had made it impossible for her to heal herself. As he watched Wendy Yushan's injuries worsen, Lu Yin's eyes suddenly widened. The giant emperor's third eye appeared in his left hand, and he fully activated his domain as he stared at the two of them. He then used flash to rush between them and raised his hand, causing 3 grains of fates and to merge into one to form a block of earth that covered his entire body. This block of earth happened to be right in the direction that Night King Gu had attacked Wendy Yushan. Bang! There was a loud explosion as a giant spatial tear swept out and tore through the void. Night King Gu's fist had landed squarely on the fates but it had been completely blocked. The next moment, Wendy Yushan's sword stabbed into Night King Gu's body, causing another penetrating injury. Fresh blood dripped down from the tip of the sword, creating a glaring scarlet color. Everyone stared at the battlefield in disbelief, as Lu Yin had actually blocked Night King Gu's punch. It wasn't just Night King Gu himself who was shocked. Even Wendy Yushan stared at Lu Yin in astonishment. What was that? Back then, the fate sen in Lu Yin's heart had awakened, and it had helped Lu Yin block Feng Mo's attack. Although it had only been a casual attack, Feng Mo was a bona fide hunter. With the defensive power of 1 grain of fates, and Lu Yin estimated that it could defend against an attack from an expert who was around 50 on the top 100 rankings. With 3 grains of fates and combined, it was not impossible for Lu Yin to block Night King Gu's punch. There was a loud thump and the 3 of them separated. Night King Gu retreated more than 10 steps and clutched his abdomen. For the first time, there was shock in his eyes as he looked at the block of earth in front of Lu Yin. What was that? It had actually blocked Night King Gu's punch. Very few people recognized fates, and including Night King Gu and Wendy Yushan, the 2 elites of the younger generation. Only the Enlighters in outer space, and not just any Enlighter at that, could recognize it. Elder Ren had been the first to recognize it, and he was astonished. How could this brat have fates? And that was a supreme treasure of the universe, and even the Sea King's dome would find it difficult to obtain one. Night Queen Chuyu was astonished. It's actually fates, and the Sea King actually gave something so important to him. It seems like he's determined to make him his son-in-law. Clearly, Night Queen Chuyu had misunderstood, but she was not the first to do so. The other Enlighters who recognized fates and all guessed that it had been given to Lu Yin by the Sea King. Otherwise, how could Lu Yin possibly have such a precious item? Not all Enlighters could recognize it, and some did not. After all, Fateson was extremely rare, and even the powerhouses of the Innerverse had not come into contact with it. On planet Pyrolite, Wendy Yushan looked at the block of earth in front of her in confusion. What's that? Fateson. It's a precious treasure that can block that guy's attacks. Let's work together. I'll block and you'll attack. Eventually we'll exhaust him to death. Lu Yin gritted his teeth. Wendy Yushan's eyes flashed and she nodded. All right. Then, under countless gazes, Lu Yin grabbed Wendy Yushan's waist and charged towards Night King Gu. Wendy Yushan did not refuse, and although she felt uncomfortable, she still allowed Lu Yin to grab her. She then raised her sword and slashed at Night King Gu. Chapter 524. Night King Gu hurriedly dodged and tore through the void to appear behind Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan. He punched out, but it was still blocked by the soil. Wendy Yushan stabbed out with her sword using the same method, but Night King Gu was not hit. He had dodged quickly, but he was helpless against Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan. With the 2 of them working together, they were undefeatable. Night Queen Chuyu was furious. The Day-Night clan had gone to great lengths to awaken Night King Gu from his cultivation, but they were still unable to seize control of the mountain range. Helpless, she left the Day-Night clan's spacecraft and appeared inside the sword sects. After a while, Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan were panting heavily as they cautiously stared at Night King Gu. Night King Gu was no longer as calm as he had been in the beginning, and his body was covered in wounds that reached deep into his bones. Unfortunately, none of them were fatal, and even the sword that had pierced through his body had not affected him. This was a monster. Again. We'll definitely exhaust him to death. Lu Yin shouted. Due to Wendy Yushan's innate gift, he had not been injured at all. Wendy Yushan was also under his protection, so she had time to heal herself and was similarly uninjured. Compared to Night King Gu, the 2 of them were just too tired. Under these circumstances, Lu Yin was completely confident that he could exhaust Night King Gu to death. 7th bro, go. Let's fight. The ghost monkey shrieked. He had inexplicably become hot-blooded. The temptation of defeating an expert ranked 15th on the top 100 rankings was too great. Even if Lu Yin could not rely on this battle record to enter the top 20, he would definitely reach the top 60. Lu Yin was also excited. We'll kill him today. Wendy Yushan raised her sword and was about to attack when there was a whoosh. A ray of sword chi swept over from the distance, but it was not aimed at Night King Gu. Instead, it was aimed at Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan. The 2 of them hurriedly retreated as this ray of sword chi had almost succeeded in its sneak attack. A figure appeared in front of them, wielding a long sword and emitting a shocking blue battle force. It was Long Yun. Long Yun's appearance caused Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan's expressions to change. One Night King Gu was already enough to tire them out, and now that Long Yun had joined the fray, even with the Fatesen's defenses, the Fatesen was too small and it could not protect the 2 from all directions. Forget it, we can't hold on, Wendy Yushan whispered. Long Yun's appearance had extinguished their hopes. Long Yun's appearance meant that they would not be able to win. Even a fool would know that Long Yun was helping Night King Gu, as the Day-Night clan and the Sword Sect had joined forces. On the mountain range North Gate lies side. In the end they would still have to hand over the Sea King's dome. Fortunately they had already extracted quite a bit. Even if most of it was handed over to the Sea King's dome, the rest would be enough to report back to his family. In outer space, Night Queen Chuyu had an ugly expression on her face. If she had a choice she would not have been willing to share with the Sword Sect. However, Night King Gu alone was not enough, so they could only work together. Although Long Yun was far from being comparable to Night King Gu, he was still qualified to work together with Night King Gu. No matter how heaven-defying Lu Yin was, it was impossible for him to withstand the combined attacks of two super experts. Lu Yin clenched his fists. He could have won and he could have done so, but he had been overturned in a single move. This was not a pleasant feeling. Back in the universe, the great powers of the inner verse had coiled around him like a giant python, making it difficult for him to breathe. But now in this place, these great powers could also join forces as they pleased, and he was being toyed with like an ant. What was the point of fighting until now? The other party could easily send two people to defeat him. Although he had been schemed against by the Sea King's dome, he had still managed to persevere until now. The various great powers had also arrived, and this suffocating pressure was enough to drive him crazy. Lu Yin could not bear it any longer. How could a random decision from the various great powers make all of his efforts go to waste? He did not want to experience the sorrow of being an ant. Wendy Yushan's pale and exhausted face reminded him of the helpless Great Yu Empire that could be threatened and toyed with at will. Lu Yin wanted to resist, even if he knew that it was unwise and that the Sea King would not blame him for retreating under these circumstances. However, he did not want to be forced to retreat by a random decision. He wanted to resist even if it was just once. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin worriedly. She could feel his unwillingness and his body trembled in anger. "You don't want to give up?" Lu Yin did not answer. He looked up and looked at Night King Gu and Long Yun. He then looked up and saw the various great powers including Night Queen Chuyu Viletree and the others, looking at him with smug expressions. "If you don't want to give up I'll help you," Wendy Yushan said, her gaze resolute. Lu Yin placed a hand on her shoulder. "There's no need. I can do it alone." Wendy Yushan was stunned. Lu Yin lifted his foot and walked forward. At the same time he handed her a money bomb. "This thing can instantly kill a hunter, so it should be enough to protect yourself." He then walked towards Night King Gu and Long Yun under countless shocked, confused and perplexed gazes. Countless people were baffled and thought that he had gone mad. On the mountain range, Hai Chi frowned with a trace of worry in her eyes. Lillian could not help but shout, "Brother Lu, that's enough. You've done enough." In the distance, Night Queen Yanqing and the others appeared and looked at Lu Yin in confusion. On the other side, the Sword Sect's group also appeared. Mu Rong, Lu Xiaoqiu Yo Yir and the others all looked at Lu Yin. In outer space Haidashao was puzzled. This kid hasn't given up yet? Elder Ren looked at Lu Yin with admiration. Lu Yin stopped about 100 meters away from Night King Gu. "This battle isn't over." He then donned his universal armor and a spear appeared in his hand. The appearance of this armor was very strange. For cultivators, the higher their realms, the less likely they would wear universal armor or ring armor. Not only would they not provide much of a defensive effect, but they would also hinder one's movements. This was also the reason why no one had worn ring armor since the battles on planet Pyrolite began. An opponent's battle techniques could penetrate the armor and attack the body, but the effects were not great. As for the spear, some people were even confused. Guns were something that many people had not seen for a long time, such as Night Queen Chuyu. She had not seen a spear for many years, so she could not immediately tell what it was. Long Yun had a strange expression and Night King Gu's eyes narrowed. He then charged towards Lu Yin and punched out. No matter what this person did, defending against Night King Gu's attack was already his limit. It was impossible for him to injure Night King Gu. If Lu Yin attacked, then Long Yun would attack as well. Wendy Yushan subconsciously raised her sword, wanting to attack. Night King Gu's fist slammed into Lu Yin's universal armor. Everyone was shocked as Lu Yin had not used his fates and there was a loud explosion as Night King Gu's fist landed on the universal armor without any obstruction. Everyone had thought that this punch would either be blocked by the fates and or send Lu Yin flying. However, no one had expected that this punch would not harm Lu Yin at all. Lu Yin raised his spear and aimed it at Night King Gu's heart. Bang! Planet Pyrolite fell silent as everyone stared blankly at Lu Yin and Night King Gu, as well as the large amount of blood that flowed out from Night King Gu's heart. Countless people were stunned. Long Yun's pupils shrank as he watched this scene in shock. Lu Yin changed the direction of his spear, and this time he aimed it at Night King Gu's forehead. Just as he was about to fire a second time, Night King Gu twisted his body and quickly dodged, leaving behind a large amount of blood. Lu Yin did not fire and he only watched silently. No one knew what had happened, but a single spear had pierced through Night King Gu's heart. This spear had been extraordinarily powerful. Could a spear release such power? This was Night King Gu, a powerhouse who had used his Night King's body. If this spear had been aimed at planet Pyrolite, it would have definitely been able to pierce through it. Lu Yin was very glad that he had bought this spear back then, as each of its shots had a power level of 80,000. Night King Gu was very strong and he was far stronger than the average cruiser, but he would have been seriously injured if he had been hit by a spear with a power level of 80,000 at close range. If he had not run away quickly, the second spear would have blown his head apart. Wendy Yushan stared at Lu Yin in disbelief. He actually had such a powerful trump card. Just what had he experienced in the past few years? Night Queen Chuyu found it hard to believe that someone had relied on an external item to heavily injure an expert from the Day-Night clan. That was the Day-Night clan, a powerful clan with endless resources. The moment they had entered planet Pyrolite, she had offered some external items to Night King Gu, but he had rejected them. She had not tried to force him, but reality was ironic. A Lemeter had been able to heavily injure an expert ranked 15th on the top 100 rankings. In the universe there were very few external items that were so powerful. How had this kid obtained them? Could it be the Sea King again? He had given Lu Yin his fates and so many other life-saving treasures. At the base of the mountain range, Night King Gu clutched at his chest, and his skeletal body looked even more withered than before. He stood in the distance and stared at Lu Yin with vigilance. Lu Yin was flabbergasted as Night King Gu had not died even after having his heart pierced. He filled his eyes with star energy and looked at Night King Gu. Night King Gu's rune lines were already very low, which meant that he had truly been heavily injured. Unfortunately, his heart had not been hit, and the power of the spear had only brushed past his heart. What a pity! Lu Yin raised his gun and aimed it at Long Yun. Long Yun felt his scalp go numb, and he instantly retreated 1,000 meters as he stared at Lu Yin with vigilance. Lu Yin did not fire as these experts were already prepared. A single shot with a power level of 80,000 might not be able to cause any damage, but at the very least they would be able to dodge it. With that in mind, Lu Yin turned his gun around and aimed it at Night King Gu. Night King Gu's eyes were filled with fear, and he retreated just like Long Yun. Not only that, but he also wanted to escape. He had been so heavily injured that he had no choice but to leave. However, he was also afraid that Lu Yin would shoot him and he did not want to expose his back to Lu Yin. Coincidentally, he saw a spacecraft that had crashed into the ground at the same time as he had. The people inside had not come out and it seemed that they were too afraid to show themselves. Night King Gu faced Lu Yin and retreated step by step until he was outside the spacecraft. He wanted to pry open the cabin door and use the spacecraft to escape into outer space. Lu Yin kept his gun aimed at Night King Gu, but he did not intend to fire because it would not be very effective. Night King Gu was also afraid that Lu Yin would fire, so he kept a vigilant eye on Lu Yin. When Night King Gu forcefully opened the cabin door, he did not even look at the person inside. Instead, he grabbed the person and threw him out like a rock. Lu Yin saw the figure being thrown at him, and he quickly moved a few meters to the side to avoid it. However, he still kept a vigilant eye on Night King Gu. By then, Night King Gu had already boarded his spacecraft and charged into outer space. Lu Yin relaxed. The powerful enemy had left and only Long Yun was left. He was not Wendy Yushan's opponent. In outer space, most people were looking at Lu Yin and Long Yun. Only the Ross Empire, Blaze Realm and Dire Barbarian clans stared strangely at Sleeping Prince, who had been thrown out by Night King Gu. Huahui gritted his teeth in anger. This bastard. Why is he still sleeping at this time? Is this person even useful? Scholar Newmoon was helpless as he did not know what to say. Chapter 525. Lei Long spoke up. This person's consumption of star essence skin is huge, far surpassing K's. He should be able to rival the top 30 of the top 100 rankings. Scholar New Moon replied, not only that, but his technique is definitely not ordinary. His power level might only be comparable to the top 30, but once someone is caught off guard and gains the initiative, even that expert from the Night King clan won't be his match. Lei Long and Hua Haoyi were astonished. What technique is that? The Dreaming Heart Sutra, Scholar New Moon calmly said. Hua Haoyi and Lei Long were confused as they had never heard of such a technique before. Scholar New Moon did not explain any further and he just stared at the screen. He had only read about it in the ancient letter, but he was not very sure. If it really was that technique, then Sleeping Prince's power was not as simple as it seemed. But even if it was not that technique, this person's true power was enough to rival the top 30 of the top 100 rankings. Why had he always remained at the 100th position? Was it really as he had said that he liked the number 100? On planet Pyrolite, Long Yun saw that Night King Gu had left, so he left as well. He could not even defeat Wendy Yushan by himself. Lu Yin put away his gun and let out a tired breath. The most difficult hurdle had passed and even stronger experts would be sent over. Based on the time it took to create the star essence skin, it would take at least half a month. By then, more than half of the Pyrolite ore in the mountain range would have been mined. Lu Yin looked towards the south. He had been worried that Mira would take advantage of this opportunity to attack, but she had held back. Lu Yin put away his universal armor and was about to return to the mountain range when he suddenly felt sleepy. Very sleepy. Was he tired? His eyelids grew heavier and his body swayed a few times. He was about to fall asleep. Something was wrong. Suddenly Lu Yin felt his scalp go numb. He saw an enormous amount of rune lines converging towards his left. He turned around and saw Sleeping Prince. At that moment, Sleeping Prince opened his eyes and lazily looked at Lu Yin with a smile. In the void, an invisible attack transformed into an indescribable killing intent that enveloped Lu Yin. This killing intent was very similar to Jiyu's. Lu Yin wanted to use the secret sidestep to avoid it, but he was too tired. His body could not keep up with his thoughts and even moving was difficult. He was so tired that he wanted to sleep. The sky seemed to darken, and even though Lu Yin could not see any killing intent, he could still see countless rune lines approaching him. This killing intent's power was enough to bury him, as this was Sleeping Prince's attack. At this moment, no one could save Lu Yin, as no one had expected that Sleeping Prince would suddenly attack. Furthermore, Lu Yin did not even have the strength to resist, and he could not even put on his universal armor once again. The countless rune lines grew closer and closer, and just as they were about to descend, Lu Yin completely gave up. He heard Wendy Yushan's voice in his ear, "Use secret art, void transfer." In the distance, the ground was covered by an invisible attack. It didn't seem to have any destructive power, but all living creatures underground died instantly. However, Lu Yin was completely unscathed. Sleeping Prince's expression changed and he turned to look to the west. There he saw Wendy Yushan staring at him with an icy gaze. He seemed to have heard an incredible attack. "You secret art? Turning the void? Is that a secret technique?" Sleeping Prince wasn't the only one who was shocked. In outer space, Elder Ren stared at Wendy Yushan in shock. "That's a secret technique. She used a secret technique." Haida Xiao was shocked. "Secret technique? How could she have a secret technique?" Night Queen Chuyu was shocked once again. She had already been shocked many times today, but none of the previous times added together could compare to this. She had personally seen Sleeping Prince's attack being diverted in another direction, which could only be accomplished by a secret technique. Elder Viletree, when Kitchen, Lei Long, Scholar New Moon, Hua Haoyi, and the rest of the Enlighters appeared in outer space and looked at Wendy Yushan with grave expressions. Secret techniques were much more precious than fates, and as they were on a completely different level. Fates and could be obtained through luck, but secret techniques were different. All secret techniques had been created by progenitors, and they were all passed down to only one person. Even so, most of them had been lost because secret techniques were too difficult to cultivate. Even among the various great powers of the Innerverse, there were very few who possessed secret techniques, and it could even be said that they did not even exist. This was because none of the great powers had ever revealed their secret techniques. But now they had actually seen a secret technique being used by an Outerverse girl, and this girl was related to a progenitor. The various enlighters' expressions changed as the appearance of a secret technique made Pyrolite unimportant. They were all thinking about how to obtain this girl. The Myriad Swords Peak had also sent someone, but they did not send an enlighter. At this moment, that Myriad Swords Peak expert immediately headed to North Castle Weave to contact his sect through the network. His sect's senior sister actually possessed a secret technique, which was too shocking. They had to invite a super powerhouse from their sect. However, the Myriad Swords Peak's people were unable to leave the astral wilderness, as they had been intercepted. The various great powers would not let Wendy Yushan off, and they would not allow the Myriad Swords Peak to interfere. On planet Pyrolite, Lu Yin's heart sank. He was glad that he had not died, but he also sighed that his secret technique had been exposed. Sleeping Prince stared at Wendy Yushan. Was that a secret technique? Wendy Yushan raised her sword and did not speak any nonsense. She slashed out and the sword chi swept towards Sleeping Prince. Sleeping Prince casually waved his hand and a formless shockwave swept out. However, it was unable to block the sword chi and it still managed to scratch his arm. His shockwave swept past Wendy Yushan, causing her body to sway and she almost fell asleep. This power was too strange. Sleeping Prince looked at the wound on his arm and his expression turned solemn. He stood in place and his body released a strange power that could cause others to fall asleep. Lu Yin saw it. He could not see that power, but he could see that the number of rune lines was increasing. He could not help but say, "Stop him." Wendy Yushan suddenly appeared in front of Sleeping Prince, and her left hand swept out. "Use secret art, void transfer." At the same time she stabbed out with her sword, and the power that Sleeping Prince had released was forcefully diverted elsewhere. His shoulder was pierced by Wendy Yushan's sword and blood splattered everywhere. Sleeping Prince's face was pale and he stared at Wendy Yushan. As expected of a secret technique. Even my power can be forcefully diverted. I admit defeat, but it's a pity that you've become everyone's target. He then retreated and leapt into outer space. Wendy Yushan lowered her sword, which was still dripping with blood. This sword had been stained with the blood of quite a few experts today. Sleeping Prince left and Lu Yin regained his vitality. He walked behind Wendy Yushan. Wendy Yushan looked up. "A secret technique. It's very powerful, isn't it?" Lu Yin nodded. "As expected of a secret technique. With it you can challenge the top 15 experts on the top 100 rankings." Wendy Yushan put her sword away. "Yes, that's why it's so valuable. Lu Yin, do you think that we can escape safely?" Lu Yin knew what she meant. After exposing her secret technique, she had become the target of all the powers. "Let's try," Lu Yin said solemnly. At this moment many powerhouses were watching them and there were at least 10 enlighters. Escape? He did not know if the Sea King's dome would help, but if not he would have to ask Mr. Mu for help. "Do you regret it?" Lu Yin could not help but ask. Wendy Yushan shook her head. "You're my only family. I don't regret saving you." "Don't worry, I'll definitely send you away safely," Lu Yin assured her. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin and nodded, but she did not say anything else. In outer space, the various enlighters looked at each other and did not speak. However, they were getting closer and closer to planet Pyrolite, and they were all thinking of ways to capture Wendy Yushan. At this moment, Elder Rin appeared, and his terrifying power level of several 100,000 caused the various enlighters to tremble. "Everyone, the Sea King's dome has promised to protect Frostwave Weave, and this woman belongs to Frostwave Weave. I hope that everyone can give the Sea King's dome some face and not touch her," Elder Rin said as he swept his gaze across all the enlighters. Night Queen Chiyu was the first to retreat, followed by Elder Viletree, Wen Kitchen and the rest. After that, all of the enlighters retreated without a single word. Hai Dashao's heart sank when he saw this scene. They won't give up. They'll definitely ask the powerhouses from their sects to help. Elder Rin nodded. "Yes, but it won't be that easy." A ripple spread out from beneath his feet further and further away until it completely sealed off the area around planet Pyrolite. He would not allow the powerhouses from the various great powers to leave, at least not for now. The enlighters from the various great powers did not show up, and it was pointless to say anything now. They had to think of a way to leave and report back to the powers behind them. Wendy Yushan's value had already exceeded the value of Pyrolite. Elder Rin could obstruct them for now, but once the Pyrolite ore was completely extracted he would no longer be able to stop them. At that time, whether or not they could obtain Wendy Yushan would depend on the strength of the various great powerhouses. Wendy Yushan revealed a secret technique while Lu Yin revealed a strength that could heavily injure Night King Gu and force Long Yun to retreat. The two of them worked together, and with Avery being held back by Hai Dashao, the competition for Pyrolite ore came to an end. No one could take the mountain range away from them. Many of the smaller powers had already finished their exploration of planet Pyrolite and wanted to leave, but they were still trapped by Elder Ren. A month later, the Pyrolite ore in the mountain range was completely extracted. Only then did the various great powers relax and look at Elder Ren. Elder Ren had clearly stated that they would have to wait until Northline Flow Zone finished refining the Pyrolite ore before removing the seal on planet Pyrolite. Until then, Lu Yin, Wendy Yushan, and Hai Chichi could leave first. This was to protect Lu Yin and the others and prevent them from being ambushed by powerhouses on their way back. However, this protection would only last for a while. Lu Yin's expression turned solemn as he looked at his cosmic ring. Everyone looked around, and even the Sea King's dome could not protect Wendy Yushan. They could only ask for Mr. Mu's help, but not here. Mr. Mu had become a legend on Xenu Star, and the various great powers feared him. Right now, the most important thing was to return to Xenu Star. Now that the Pyrolite ore had been completely extracted, the star essence skins no longer had any value. The powerhouses of the various great powers could then attack planet Pyrolite and disperse the gas from the planet, exposing the entire planet to outer space and greatly changing its environment. Planet Pyrolite had begun to collapse. Lu Yin took out his collapsible spacecraft, which could fit 3 people at a time. The ground beneath his feet cracked open, and the Limiters who had been fighting on planet Pyrolite either entered their spacecraft or donned their universal armor. They were no longer protected by planet Pyrolite's atmosphere, and their entire bodies were exposed to outer space. Thank you, Cyrus. I'll update at 3 p.m. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Chapter 526. At this moment, the explorers who had been sent to planet Pyrolite felt much more comfortable. Only by being in the universe could they display their advantage. So what if Lu Yin was an unequaled Limiter? Could he still roam the universe? However, when the explorers recalled how Lu Yin had heavily injured Night King Gu while wearing his universal armor, their psychological advantage vanished. They hoped that Lu Yin's universal armor would be destroyed and that he would die in outer space. They could not be blamed for their viciousness, as Lu Yin had done quite a few disgusting things over the past month. The most serious of them all was stealing star essence skins. Aside from the 2 sets that he had given to Wendy Yushan, he had stolen a total of 11 more. With his strength, his universal armor, and that terrifying gun, there was no skin that he could not get his hands on. Of the 11 skins, 5 had been sold and there were only 6 left. The 5 skins had been sold for 5,000 star essence, which wasn't much, but there was nothing that could be done about it. The explorers he had robbed were all from small organizations, and none of them could compare to the top 80 of the top 100 rankings. The remaining 6 skins were the same. The ground beneath Lu Yin's feet cracked open, and Hai Chichi had already entered the spacecraft. Wendy Yushan had also given the 2 star essence skins to Lu Yin before entering the spacecraft as well. Lu Yin waited for Hai Dashao as he knew that the young man had something to say to him. Soon the void tore apart and Hai Dashao appeared. When he saw Hai Dashao, Lu Yin instinctively felt disgusted. No one liked being used, and this time he had been completely used by the Sea King's dome. Hai Dashao wasn't surprised by Lu Yin's attitude. Your betrothal gift is pretty good. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. Don't worry, the Sea King's dome will honor its promise. From now on, Frostwave Weave will be under the Sea King's dome's protection, and it will be incorporated into the Sea King's dome, Hai Dashao said proudly. Is that Pyrolite enough? Lu Yin asked. Hai Dashao smiled. You don't have to worry about that. You've already done what you can and you can't care about the rest. Hurry up and become an explorer. Father admires you. Lu Yin fell silent. Hai Dashao's lips curled up. Do you mind what happened this time? Lu Yin sneered. Do you like being used? Hai Dashao shook his head. I don't know how to enlighten others and you don't have the qualifications for me to enlighten you. I only have one thing to say. One day you'll realize how wise you've made the right decision. He then looked at the collapsible spacecraft and at Wendy Yushan. What's your relationship with her? That's none of your business. Hai Dashao sighed in admiration. There aren't many people in the entire universe who know a secret technique, and even I don't know it. It seems like her identity isn't as simple as it seems. I can ask Elder Run to escort her to the Sea King's dome so that father can protect her. There's no need for that. We'll settle our own matters. Lu Yin was disgusted as the Sea King's attitude was too arrogant. After using Lu Yin, the Sea King's attitude was still giving off the feeling that Lu Yin should feel honored. This made Lu Yin instinctively resist, and he really wanted to punch Hai Dashao in the face. Hai Dashao retracted his gaze and looked at Lu Yin. Do you know what a secret technique represents? She's already been targeted, and even the Sea King's dome's promise might not be able to completely protect her. For her own good, let her come with me to the Sea King's dome. I won't go to the Sea King's dome. Wendy Yushan's voice rang out. Hai Dashao frowned. Hai Chichi shouted at Hai Dashao through the spacecraft. Second bro, you're too stupid. How can you chase a girl like that? You should be laughing. You should be inviting her to the Sea King's dome as a guest and protecting her while you're at it. You're stupid. Hai Dashao met Wendy Yushan's eyes and said, the Sea King's dome's promise will keep you safe for now, but no one can predict what will happen in the future. Take care of yourself. My promise to you will always be valid. He then gave Wendy Yushan his gadget's contact information. Hai Dashao had taken a liking to Wendy Yushan. Both Lu Yin and Hai Chichi could tell. Lu Yin was unhappy. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, you can leave. Hai Dashao glanced at Lu Yin one more time before tearing through the void and leaving. After Hai Dashao left, the second person to appear was Lily Ann. It could be said that she had set her sights on Frostwave Weave the first time she had met Lu Yin. At that time she had already determined Frostwave Weave's importance. This woman was very far-sighted. Brother Lu, Granny Chan asked me to represent Northline Flow Zone. Thank you for your help. No matter how much pyrolite we obtain, Northline Flow Zone will never forget Brother Lu's kindness, Lily Ann said solemnly. Lu Yin nodded. If you really want to thank me, then take these. He then took out the remaining 8 star essence skins. I'll sell them to you at a fixed price of 5,000 star essence. This was a very fair price. Although the star essence skins were useless, the amount of star essence that could be extracted was still more than 5,000. Lily Ann seemed to have been prepared for this, and she took out 5,000 star essence from her cosmic ring before taking out another 3,000. That's 8,000 star essence in total. We can't let Brother Lu suffer a loss. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. To Northline Flow Zone this amount of star essence was a lot, but they did not care too much about it. However, to Lu Yin this was a huge sum that he had never seen before. Even when he had used the Sea King's medallion to reimburse himself for items in the Sea King's dome, the total cost had only been around 15,000 star essence. Now he had more than 17,000 star essence in his cosmic ring. He was too rich. He could not help but sigh at how rich he was. More than 10,000 star essence required a lot of space in a cosmic ring. Fortunately, the cosmic ring that Northgate Lai had given him had enough space. However, as he had more and more money in the future, this cosmic ring might not have enough space. Others could store their money in their cards, but Lu Yin could not, as he needed to use it at any time. This was a problem that gave him a headache. Lily Ann left, but before she left she promised Lu Yin that Northline Flow Zone would do its best to help Frostwave Weave's economy recover. At the same time, Northline Flow Zone recognized Lu Yin's position in the 10 Arbiters Council, which meant that he had the authority to judge and supervise the younger generation of Northline Flow Zone. This meant that Lu Yin's current status was above Northgate Lai's. Lu Yin smiled bitterly. What was the point of having these things? When he returned to Xenu Star, the various powers would react and send their old undying powerhouses to capture Wendy Yushan. He would then have to ask Mr. Mu for help. At that time not only would Wendy Yushan leave, but he would also leave the Great Yu Empire and the Sea King's Dome. He would then join Leon's armada in the Cosmic Sea. At that time he might even become a glorious pirate. But before that he wanted to make a trip to Xinwu continent and help Ming Yen settle down. This was also a problem that gave him a headache, but it was not too difficult to solve. The strongest person on Xinwu continent was only a hunter, And with Lu Yin's abilities he should be able to escape from a hunter. What he needed to consider now was time. He had to take Ming Yen away before the various powers fell out with the Sea King's dome over the secret technique. With Mr. Mu's abilities, it would be safe for him to head to the Cosmic Sea. The only problem was that he did not know how strong Mr. Mu was. If even Mr. Mu could not stop Lu Yin, then he would have to send Wendy to the Sea King's dome. It was a pity that he would have to leave Earth, which was the most peaceful place he had ever been. It would be very difficult for him to return to his homeland. Lu Yin had forgotten that Wendy Yushan's secret technique was very attractive to the Sword Sect and the Day-Night clan, but that was only because of the technique itself. At the very least, Vile Tree and Night Queen Chuyu could not recognize the Yu secret art. However, things were different for the Yo Court and the Neo-Human Alliance as they had recognized the technique. In outer space, Yo Yer looked at Wendy Yushan through a spacecraft. I never thought that the Yu secret art would reappear in a fringe weave. You family, you can't avoid it. In the darkness, a pair of inhuman eyes also stared at Wendy Yushan. A few days later, Lu Yin brought Hai Chi-Chi and Wendy Yushan back to Xenu Star. Hai Chi-Chi had a reluctant expression on her face, as she still wanted to go somewhere else to play. However, she did not cause any trouble for Lu Yin as she was aware of the existence of the secret technique. At present, Lu Yin and Wendy Yushan were in an extremely difficult situation. The various powers were still sealed off around planet Pyrolite, and they were unable to send out any news. Once the seal was lifted, what awaited them would be a storm. Wendy Yushan had originally planned to head to the Innerverse Myriad Swords Peak, but Lu Yin stopped her. The Myriad Swords Peak would not give up on the Yu secret art, and no one would be able to protect her. The only possibility was to head to the Cosmic Sea where Lu Yin's family, Big Sis, Uncle Ruben and the others were. Lu Yin gave some instructions to Hu Qingshan and the others before contacting Barley in East San Dios. He had asked Barley to keep an eye on the situation on Shenwu continent. Lu Yin had originally planned to head to Shenwu continent after making arrangements on Xenu Star and find a way to bring Ming Yen out. However, Barley had given him some very bad news. Shenwu continent was divided internally, and the Reverend King Ming Zhaoshu had allied with the powers of the outside world. Many powers had stationed powerhouses outside Shenwu continent, and aside from those who belonged to those powers, no one else was allowed to enter. Some of those powers belonged to the Day-Night clan. Lu Yin's heart sank as he had not expected this. Actually, he should have. The Day-Night clan was tyrannical and so were the great powers of the Innerverse. Since Ming Zhaoshu was willing to cooperate with them, they naturally would not give the other powers a chance to take advantage of the situation. They would definitely seal off Shenwu continent. It would be difficult for Lu Yin to enter Shenwu continent now, and even if he did, he would have to deal with the Day-Night clan and the other powers if he wanted to leave. By that time, planet Pyrolite's seal might have been lifted, and he would be safe with the Sea King's dome's protection. However, Wendy Yushan would not have anyone to protect her. The Sea King's dome's promise was not as important as the secret technique. Lu Yin locked himself in King Zishan's palace and pondered for a long time. In the end, he decided that he would not go to Shenwu continent for now. Aside from Ming Zhaoshu, no one else knew about his relationship with Ming Yen, and for the time being, no one could use this to make an issue out of it. Ming Zhaoshu would not easily use Ming Yen as a bargaining chip, so she should be safe. What Lu Yin needed to do now was wait for the situation to develop on Xenu Star. Besides, even if he wanted to bring Ming Yen out, she might not be willing to do so. If the great powers were to fall out with the Sea King's dome over the secret technique, then Lu Yin would have no choice but to ask Mr. Mu for help. A few more days passed, and as Northline Flow Zone finished refining pyrolite, Elder Rin lifted the seal on planet Pyrolite. Immediately many spacecraft rushed out. Elder Rin watched this scene with a calm expression. Many thanks. Cyrus. This is a reward from a brother. Update at 3 p.m. Thank you. The second volume is about to be released. Overcast Scroll. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 527. Elder. Haida Shao opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but Elder Rin slowly said, "The Sea King's dome can intimidate them for the time being, but it won't last for long. During this time they will try to find out more about that little girl and make their own arrangements. If they can't resist the temptation of the secret technique, they will make their move. Isn't she in danger? Hai Dashao couldn't help but ask upon hearing Elder Ren's words. Elder Ren glanced at him. Do you really like her? Hai Dashao nodded and raised his head. I want to marry her. Elder Ren smiled. That's not bad. She possesses a secret technique and is qualified to marry into the Sea King's dome. Alright, I'll ask the Sea King for instructions. If it's possible, the Sea King will probably make a trip for his daughter-in-law and future son-in-law. I hope that those old bastards are truly dead. Otherwise, the universe will be thrown into chaos. They did not know that the Neoverse had been unable to sit still for a long time. Unfortunately, it had lost its way and had been led by Leon's armada all over the cosmic ocean. After planet Pyrolite's seal was lifted, the various great powers each escorted Pyrolite back to the Innerverse and remained vigilant against each other. However, the Day-Night Clan, Sword Sect, One Family and other organizations weren't too worried as no one dared to rob them. Instead, it was the smaller organizations that received news that they had been attacked not long after leaving the astral wilderness. At the beginning of the battle on planet Pyrolite, someone had already offered a high price to purchase Pyrolite. There was no lack of desperados in the universe, and Grand Top Weave, Lars Weave and other forces were also coveting Pyrolite. As such, it was only natural that these forces would be attacked. However, when the Wen family was robbed, everything became abnormal. Night Queen Chuyu put down her gadget with a solemn expression. The Wen family had actually been robbed. Who would be so daring? Wen Kitchen was not someone to be trifled with. Only an enlighter with a power level of around 250,000 would be able to rob the Wen family, and that did not even include the Pyrolite. It should be known that the Wen family had mined quite a bit of Pyrolite, and Pyrolite itself was a deterrent to outsiders. It was impossible that Wen Kitchen did not even have the time to detonate the Pyrolite. Now that it was snatched away, it could only prove one thing: Wen Kitchen did not even have the time to detonate the Pyrolite. The person who snatched it away was a horrifying elite with over 200,000 combat power. Speed up! Night Queen Chuyu immediately shouted. However, not long after she finished speaking, the entire spacecraft, no, the entire region of space, froze. Night Queen Chuyu's expression changed, as the power that had frozen the void caused her to tremble in fear. This was a super powerhouse. In less than a minute, the spacecraft returned to normal. Night Queen Chuyu hurriedly tore through the void and headed towards the storage area of Pyrolite, but all she saw was a blank space. Right after the Day-Night Clan, the Sword Sect was robbed. Even with an enlighter like Viletree, the Sword Sect's Pyrolite had still been stolen. However, during this period of time, an event that shook the entire universe occurred. An elder from the Sea King's dome had been severely injured, and Northline Flowzone's Pyrolite had also been stolen. This news shook the Innerverse and Outerverse. Elder Ren was an old freak with a power level in the hundreds of thousands. Since he had been heavily injured, it could only mean that the one who had stolen Pyrolite was a terrifying powerhouse with a power level of over 400,000 or even 500,000. The various great powers had spent countless resources on Pyrolite, and many of their disciples and successors had lost their lives. However, it had been stolen at the last moment, which completely infuriated them. In the Day-Night Clan's ancestral land, the ground cracked open as a pair of eyes opened. They looked through the void and into the endless distance. In that instant, all of the Day-Night Clan members within the ancestral land felt their scalps go numb. All of the gadgets that could detect a person's power level had exploded, and the gadgets belonging to several hunters had also exploded. Their gadgets had detected a terrifying power level. The Sword Sect had a wine hut and swordsmen were blessed with wine. Countless sword experts loved to drink, and many sword techniques were comprehended while drunk. At this moment within the wine hut, an old man stood up from beneath dozens of empty wine jars. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and sighed before disappearing with a jar in his arms. In the erudite flow zone, the sound of reading resounded through the sky. Students hugged their books and swayed their heads as they read. Among the many young students, an old man with a head full of white hair was particularly eye-catching. He had been studying with this group of students for more than 10 days. The students' initial curiosity gradually turned into sympathy, and they gradually stopped paying attention to the old man. They thought that he was a scholar who had failed multiple times and was unwilling to give up, so they wanted to continue studying. The old man suddenly put down his book and looked up at the sky before disappearing. This scene shocked many of the students, and they all thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Not long after, a piece of news shook the Outerverse, causing the entire Outerverse to panic. An old freak with a power level of over 400,000 had appeared in the Day-Night clan, and he was investigating the matter of pyrolite being stolen. He had even said that if he found the culprit, his entire family would be annihilated, which fully demonstrated the tyranny of the Day-Night clan. It wasn't just the Day-Night clan. The Sword Sect and the Wen family also had old freaks with power levels of over 400,000. Among them, the drunken elder from the Sword Sect had been the first to find Northgate Taisui from the Northline flow zone. This was because Northgate Taisui could stealthily steal all of the pyrolite. Northgate Taisui and the drunken elder from the Sword Sect had battled in the Northline flow zone, and their battle had caused the heavens to collapse. No one knew who had won or lost. Lu Yin did not care about what was happening in outer space. He was only concerned about Wendy Yushan. Over the past few days, Wendy Yushan had received many messages from various great powers. They had all offered tempting rewards to invite Wendy Yushan to join them, and the Myriad Swords Peak had also asked her to return to her sect. They had tried peaceful means before resorting to force, as they were both wary of the Sea King's dome and wary of each other. Wendy Yushan was like another planet pyrolite that had been placed on a platter by various great powers, ready to be enjoyed at any time. Under Wendy Yushan's radiance, Lu Yin's presence was almost non-existent. He estimated that it wouldn't be long before someone would appear on Xenu star. At this moment, many unknown spacecraft had already appeared outside the star. Hai Dashao had also tried to contact Wendy Yushan over the past few days, but she had not picked up. Lu Yin felt very satisfied when he saw this. After more than 10 days, the 3 old freaks that had appeared were unable to find anything. Elder Rin insisted that the culprit had come from the Neoverse. In the end, when Xianxia stepped forward and invited the Starsabil sect out. Back then, Starsabil had said that when Xianxia's answer would receive the Starsabil sect's support. At the time, Lu Yin had known that the Starsabil sect's support was very important, but he hadn't had a clear idea of what it meant. Only now did he truly understand what the Starsabil sect's support meant. The Starsabil sect's target was the Starfall Sea, or more accurately, the Sea King's dome. When Hai Chichi received the news, her expression changed. Lu Yin's scalp went numb. Was this for real? Was the Starsabil sect really that godly? How could he predict the cause and effect of a single move? Lu Yin didn't believe it. He didn't believe it, but everyone else did. The various powers of the universe did as well. Even though both the Innerverse and Outerverse were apprehensive of the Sea King's dome, that was because they were worried that the Sea King would favor one side over the other. They weren't truly afraid of the Sea King. In terms of strength, whether it was the Day-Night clan, the Sword Sect, or the Wen family, none of them were weaker than the Sea King's dome. Once they joined forces, even the Sea King would not be able to withstand them. When the Starsabil sect discovered that it was the Sea King's dome, the 3 great powers joined forces with many other powers of the Innerverse and headed towards the Starfall Sea. Among them, there were at least 10 old freaks with power levels in the hundreds of thousands, and there were even envoys among them. I want to go back and find my father, Hai Chichi anxiously said when she found Lu Yin. Lu Yin immediately comforted her and contacted Hai Dashao. Was it really your Sea King's dome that stole it? Lu Yin asked. Hai Dashao did not answer. Hai Chichi anxiously said, second brother, say something. Hai Dashao calmly replied, take good care of Chichi and don't let her get hurt. This matter has nothing to do with you. Lu Yin did not understand why the Sea King's dome needed pyrolite so much. To the various powers, pyrolite was only a deterrent, and it was not enough to pose a threat to powerhouses with power levels in the hundreds of thousands. This was also the reason why the various powers had not mobilized their old freaks. If there really was something that could threaten a powerhouse with a power level in the hundreds of thousands, those old freaks would have appeared long ago. However, the Sea King's need for pyrolite was too strange. It was so strange that it was unimaginable, and it was even willing to anger the various powers. Second brother, I want to go back to the Sea King's dome. I want to find my father. Hai Chichi shouted. Hai Dashao calmly replied, there's no need to come back. No one dares to start a war with my Sea King's dome. Don't worry, even if all the powers of the Innerverse join forces, They still won't be able to defeat my Sea King's dome in the Starfall Sea. He then cut off the call. Hai Chi still wanted to go to the Starfall Sea, but Lu Yin stopped her. Even with the speed of a collapsible spacecraft, it'll take a long time to reach the Starfall Sea. By then everything will have been settled. Your second brother is right. For the sake of Pyrolite, the various powers will not go to war with the Sea King's dome. Also, don't forget that aside from the Sea King's dome, there's also the Greyweed continent and other planets in the Starfall Sea. Those planets all have old freaks with power levels in the hundreds of thousands overseeing them. Hai Chi-Chi's body trembled and she slowly crouched down and buried her head in her arms. At this moment she finally understood what Lu Yin had been feeling. She recalled that Lu Yin had once asked her what she would do if the Sea King's dome fell into chaos. Who would have thought that this day would come so quickly? Hai Chi-Chi was a jumpy person, but she was not stupid. Pyrolite was very important to the various powers of the Innerverse, and they valued their reputation even more. The Sea King's dome had slapped those powers in the face this time. Regardless of whether it was the Sword Sect or the Day-Night clan, neither would tolerate this and a war would break out at any moment. More importantly, Hai Chi-Chi had a vague feeling that her father was hiding something from her, which made her feel uneasy. She suddenly understood why her father had agreed to let her out so easily. It was because he had been afraid that she would be implicated, and everything had already been arranged beforehand. Lu Yin, can we go to the Sea King's dome? Hai Chi-Chi looked up at Lu Yin with a pleading expression. Lu Yin had never seen Hai Chi-Chi like this before, and it was as if she had become a completely different person. He raised a hand and placed it on her head. Don't worry, nothing will happen to the Sea King's dome. Have you forgotten about Elder Tong? Didn't you say that his strategy is unparalleled? With him around, everything will be easily resolved. Hai Chi-Chi buried her head in her arms again, looking very pitiful. Lu Yin raised his head and looked in the direction of the Starfall Sea. Sea King, what are you trying to do? Outside the Starfall Sea, there was an unprecedented change. Countless experts swarmed in and there were even envoys that flitted past. The entrance to the Starfall Sea trembled and the seaweed split open. Everyone prostrated themselves as they looked at the countless powerhouses that blotted out the sky. With the Sword Sect and the Day-Night clan leading the charge, they aggressively charged into the Starfall Sea. Perhaps they had all been waiting for this moment for a long time. The various powers of the Innerverse had joined forces to deal with the Starfall Sea for some reason. It was neither Pyrolite nor Pyrolite. The Innerverse did not allow powers that had completely broken away from the structure to exist, and the Starfall Sea was no exception. Countless people were watching this battle and at the same time, countless people were worried about it. No one knew how it would end, and even when Sansi, who had invited the Starsibyl sect, regretted his decision. He had never thought that it would lead to such a huge problem. Thank you. Cyrus Brothers' support, the third chapter will be presented. Tomorrow the second volume will be released. Overturn the Heavens. Thank you, brothers, for your support. Chapter 528. During this time the Starfall Sea had been bustling with activity. Pirate King Haizaj Leon had just come to cause trouble and now there were even more powerhouses. However, the people of the Sea King's dome had already become indifferent, as the Sea King was not even at the Sea King's dome. He was at the edge of the Starfall Sea, beneath a waterfall that was rumored to have no end. Legend had it that the river of the Starfall Sea originated from an incomparably huge waterfall. The beginning could not be seen and the end was another waterfall that flowed in reverse. Similarly, the end could not be seen. The Starfall Sea was like a depression in a huge river. It was just that no one knew where the beginning and end were. Along with the waterfall, the Starfall Sea would have currents that could drown planets and destroy everything. Similarly, along with the waterfall, many strange objects would appear and no one knew where they came from. These objects had attracted countless people to search for them, and this was one of the reasons why the Starfall Sea had attracted so many powerhouses from the Innerverse and Outerverse. The Undying Manual had once been born in the Starfall Sea, and there were many other things that were similar to it. The Sea King stood beneath the waterfall when a group of people appeared in front of him. Halt! The Hall of Honor has ordered that no one is allowed to approach without permission. The Sea King ignored the group and leaped up, charging upwards along the waterfall. The people from the Hall of Honor were enraged and they all attacked. There were 12 of them and all of them were in lighters. Above them, a pair of eyes opened and looked at the Sea King in shock. "Brother Sea King, why are you forcing your way in?" The Sea King waved his hand, and the 12 enlighters spat out blood as they were sent tumbling into the waterfall. The Sea King's trident appeared in his hand and he stabbed forward. "Brother Sea King, have you forgotten your agreement with the Hall of Honor? You're not allowed to approach this place." A middle-aged man then walked out of the waterfall and attacked the Sea King with his arms. The Sea King's eyes were cold. "Scram! You can't stop me." There was a boom and a huge gap appeared in the waterfall. However, compared to the entire waterfall, this gap was only a small crack. The Sea King, whose power level was over 500,000, clashed with another powerhouse whose power level was also over 500,000, but he was only able to create a small crack in the waterfall. Soon, the middle-aged man spat out blood as he crashed into the waterfall. He roared, "Sea King, are you betraying this region of space?" The Sea King's face was grim. "Instead of living under a hypocritical starry sky forever, it's better to die with dignity. I don't care how my descendants judge me. Your Hall of Honor is too conservative." He then leapt up like a fish leaping over a waterfall. The middle-aged man hurriedly contacted the Hall of Honor. He had a premonition that something big was about to happen. With the Sea King's personality, he would not make a move unless he was fully prepared. "Quick, get Elder Zen. The Sea King is going to open the upper 3 gates." The middle-aged man shouted into his gadget. High up in the sky, the Sea King's speed became faster and faster. As he flew higher and higher, his gaze became more and more resolute. There were no records of exactly how tall the waterfall was. However, this waterfall created the Sea of Fallen Stars, drowning a part of the starry sky. Even planets were like grains of sand. The higher they went, the more powerful the waterfall became. However, the Sea King was still able to withstand it. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Even with the Sea King's speed as an emissary, he still flew for a long time. When he finally stopped, all he could see was the boundless waterfall. The Sea King took a deep breath and wielded the Sea King's trident. With a loud roar, the trident tore through the waterfall, revealing a giant stone gate behind it. The gate's size was indescribable, and the moment it appeared, the entire Sea of Fallen Stars trembled. Everyone looked in the direction of the waterfall and felt a tremor that came from the depths of their hearts. At the same time, within the Sea of Fallen Stars, 2 elders stopped at the same time and looked at each other in bewilderment. One of them was from the Day-Night clan while the other was from the Sword sect. Both were emissaries with power levels over 500,000. They had originally planned on denouncing the Sea King's dome, but at this moment they stopped. It wasn't just them. All of the experts from the Innerverse great powers who had followed the Sea King's dome stopped as well. They trembled as they felt an unparalleled pressure, as if they were facing their natural enemy. Below the waterfall, the middle-aged man's eyes narrowed. Too late. It's still too late. In a corner of the Sea of Fallen Stars, the Sea King's eldest son's eyes were filled with grief. "Farewell, father." Far above the waterfall, the Sea King panted heavily as he stared at the giant stone gate with shock and determination. Only a few people in the entire universe knew what this stone gate was isolating. Today he would blast it open. The Sea King's trident stabbed at the stone gate, but it did not budge. The Sea King's eyes narrowed. As expected, he devoutly took out a package from his chest. It was a very ordinary package, and then he took out a blood-stained robe from within. The moment the robe appeared, the void began to boil. Countless cracks spread out from above, as if the void could not withstand the robe's pressure. The Sea King's eyes were filled with mockery. The hypocritical heavens really can't withstand Senior's strength. "Senior, please lend me a hand and blast open this hypocritical sky so that Diwu can have a bright future." He then took out all of the pyrolite, wrapped it in the robe and smashed it against the stone gate. In the Sea of Fallen Stars, an elder suddenly appeared. He only took one step before taking a second step and appearing above the Innerverse powerhouses. Even the 2 emissaries were shocked when they saw the elder and their faces paled. With his third step, the elder appeared above the Sea King's dome and casually glanced at it. With his fourth step, he appeared above the waterfall. When the elder appeared, he happened to see the robe smashing against the stone gate. The elder wanted to stop it, but he seemed to be afraid of something. He could have stopped it, but he still hesitated, and with that one step the robe smashed against the stone gate. At that moment the heavens collapsed and the earth split apart. The sea of fallen stars split apart, and the stone gate also split apart. Behind the stone gate, an old woman with a fierce gaze appeared. When she saw the robe, her expression changed. This is... She only managed to say a few words before the robe brushed past her. Half of her body was destroyed and she died. Even before she died, her eyes were filled with endless terror. Behind the old woman there was a second stone gate. The robe did not slow down and smashed into the stone gate once more. As the gate split apart, the same scene occurred. However, this time not only the sea of fallen stars, but even the chaos flow zone and the astral river that separated the inner verse and outer verse trembled. This time there was another person behind the stone gate. It was an old man, and when he opened his eyes, everything in sight was destroyed and turned into nothingness. The Sea King felt a chill run down his spine, as this power was not something that he could contend against. However, the old man's dignified gaze only lasted for an instant. When the robe appeared, his expression changed just like the old woman's. Progenitor Chen's robe. How dare you? The old man tried to grab the robe, but at that moment the pyrolite within the robe erupted. The Sea King had personally taken action and seized more than half of the pyrolite. All of the pyrolite exploded and combined with the robe's power, staining the robe with its blood. Even though the old man's power level was monstrous, he still could not block this explosive power. In terms of power level, this explosive power was in the millions or even higher. The robe was torn apart by the pyrolite's explosive power, and it finally smashed into the third gate behind the old man. The old man shouted, "Ants! The ancestors were merciful enough to let you live, but now you dare to bite the hand that fed you." The Sea King stared at the third gate behind the old man and screamed inwardly, "Open, open, open!" The old man turned around and stared at the third gate as well. Crack! There was a soft sound as the robe turned to dust. The pyrolite's explosive power gradually disappeared, and the third gate cracked open. Even though it was only a tiny crack, it emanated an aura that was completely different from this region of space. This aura caused the heavens to change. The Sea King laughed maniacally. "That's it. This is the true heavens. This is the fifth. This is the fifth." The old man was furious. "Ants, you're courting death." He then reached out to grab the Sea King. The Sea King continued to laugh, but he had no intention of resisting. This old man possessed an incomparably terrifying strength, and he was not someone the Sea King could resist. Just as the old man was about to grab the Sea King, the other old men who had arrived at the Starfall Sea acted at the same time. They pulled the Sea King back and raised their palms to meet the old man guarding the stone gate. The shocking attack caused the Sea King's mind to explode. He was pulled back by the old man and he looked up. "Elder Tan?" Elder Chan's expression was solemn. The old man guarding the stone gate raised his hand again. "Ants, even if we're at the same realm, we can still easily suppress you. You're doomed." The Sea King's expression turned serious. "Elder Chan, leave on your own. I'll hold him back." Elder Chan did not reply. Instead he stared ahead, or more accurately behind the old man guarding the stone gate. He stared at the third stone gate and his pupils suddenly shrank. He saw a beautiful jade-white finger that had crushed the stone gate that had been cracked open. The finger then pointed at the old man guarding the gate. The old man's scalp went numb and he turned around. His face drained of color. "Who's there?" The finger easily tapped the old man's head, and the old man's head was almost pressed into his chest. His entire body was blasted downwards, and after that the finger retracted. Elder Chan and the Sea King looked on in shock. Through the crumbling stone gate they saw an unfamiliar expanse of space. They saw a pair of clear eyes that were so beautiful and so unattainable. The third stone gate finally crumbled, and an endless stream of energy swept through the Starfall Sea at an indescribable speed. Then it swept through the innerverse, astral river, cosmic sea, outerverse, and so on. In the Starfall Sea, countless people looked up in confusion. Why did it feel like the sky had brightened? The powerhouses of the Day-Night clan, Sword Sect, and various other great powers looked up and felt that something had changed. Space had changed. Following that, the sky shattered. Everyone's jaws dropped as they stared at the sky in disbelief. They saw the sky crack open and disappear, and then another sky appeared. At the same time, the astral river suddenly underwent a drastic change. The liquid energy surged upwards and overturned the astral river Arkansas. It was as if someone had lifted the gigantic astral river arc and smashed it into the outerverse. In the innerverse, the astral river tributaries were in the same situation. The astral river had completely isolated the innerverse and outerverse. Thank you for your support, brothers. The second volume is now open. The Overturning Heaven scroll is now entering a new chapter in the universe. Thank you for your support. Chapter 529. In the outerverse on Xenu Star, Lu Yin stared at the sky in shock. What was going on? The sky was gone. He had just seen the sky crack open and shatter like a mirror, and then another sky had appeared. This scene suddenly reminded him of the words he had heard on the island at the end of the Ocean of Death. The sky has changed, and this sky is now 6. 5 has changed the sky and 5 has become 6. From now on, this universe is covered in a veil of hypocrisy. We are unwilling to accept this. This reminded him of the monkey's description of the Rune Line civilization. One sky changes for another. Hai Chi suddenly cried out in fear. Father, I can't feel Father's strength. Lu Yin was shaken and he had a bad premonition. Had something happened to the Sea King? In the Starfall Sea beside a waterfall, the Sea King was ecstatic. I did it. I did it. Elder Chan stared at the shattered third door and his bright eyes disappeared. Not long after, the third door actually closed on its own. The Sea King's laughter came to an abrupt halt and his face paled. Why did it close? Elder Chan sighed in relief. They don't want to have anything to do with us. That's good, that's good. The Sea King roared and raised his Sea King's trident, about to smash it against the stone door. However, without blood-stained robes, his attack was unable to cause any damage to the stone door. Elder Chan barked, Enough. Do you really want this universe to be destroyed? The Sea King looked at Elder Chan with a resolute gaze. I'm unwilling to accept this. If we don't open this door, we'll always be beneath them. We'll always be ants. Elder Chan closed his eyes. Even if you open the stone door, you'll only lead to another hopeless situation. This has already happened before and I won't allow it to happen again. The Sea King seemed to have lost all of his strength and he closed his eyes. Arch-Elder Chan looked at him. Today's result is for the best. We've torn apart the hypocrisy of the universe, and we won't attract any more powerful enemies. However, he then looked down at the waterfall. War is coming. This will be a war that will sweep across the entire universe. Whether it's us, the astral beast domain, or the technocracy, none of us can escape. Beneath the waterfall, the old man who had been guarding the stone gate screamed, You ants, we won't let you off. We'll make this part of the starry sky flow with blood. We'll make your ancestors weep. We'll make this part of the starry sky disappear. The old man's eyes flickered and he lowered his head. A spear had pierced through his chest and blood was dripping into the water. The old man slowly turned his head and saw a black warhorse with blue flames under its feet. On the warhorse there was a ghost-like silhouette. The silhouette was wearing armor and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He could only see 2 balls of flames through the armor. Those were his eyes. His eyes were so cold that it made people shiver. The spear was pulled back and the old man's organs were pulverized. His eyes lost their vitality and he fell into the sea. Arch-Elder Chan appeared in the sky with the Sea King. He looked at the silhouette on the warhorse. I didn't expect you to appear. It must feel good to kill an old enemy. The 2 balls of flames on the warhorse looked at Arch-Elder Chan. It would have been very difficult to kill him if I hadn't been injured. Does your appearance mean that the burial grounds will reopen? Arch-Elder Chan asked solemnly. The figure on the warhorse turned around and said, The burial garden has been reopened. The living cannot be seen and only the dead can be seen. You can enter the burial garden. A calamity is coming, so you should focus on them. After that, the ghostly figure disappeared. Arch-Elder Chan sighed. The burial grounds will reopen and the dead will reappear. So what? No one can escape the calamity that's coming, and the burial grounds will be no different, the Sea King said. Arch-Elder Chan looked at him. How did you get Progenitor Chen's blood-stained robes? The Sea King replied, There's nothing in the Starfall Sea but I found them by chance. Arch-Elder Chan shook his head. Everything is the will of the heavens. No, it's Progenitor Chen's blessing. Our ancestors hoped that we would resist and not wait for death without dignity. Arch-Elder Chan looked at him for a while. It's too late to say anything now. I hope that you're right. He then took a step forward. The calamity is coming and we can't afford any more internal strife. The Hall of Honor will help you shoulder this matter, and I hope that you will shoulder your own responsibilities. Arch-Elder Chan then vanished. The Sea King gripped his spear tightly and bowed to Arch-Elder Chan's back. If not for Arch-Elder Chan, he would already be dead. Lu Yin did not know what had happened in the Starfall Sea, but he had just received shocking news. The astral river had been reversed, and the innerverse and outerverse had been completely separated. Even the astral river arc had been overturned. When he first received the news, he could not believe it. Why had the astral river changed so drastically? But when he thought about how the heavens had been torn apart, something incredible had probably happened in the depths of the universe. Beep 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 beep. Lu Yin opened his communicator. Royal Regent, an explosive energy has appeared in the third filament, and it's completely isolated from the other regions. How strong is the energy? Lu Yin asked. It's equivalent to a catastrophic cosmic event, but after some investigation, this energy has already begun to decline. It'll probably disappear completely within a month. Lu Yin expressed his understanding. Not long after, he received many more similar reports. He put down his gadget. Many places in the Great Yu Empire had been isolated by the explosive energy, but these energies did not last long. The longest would take about a year to fade, and this was just the Great Yu Empire. Lu Yin believed that the rest of the outerverse would be the same, and there would be many areas isolated by the explosive energy. Since the astral river was liquid energy, it made sense for it to explode. With the astral river's energy intensity, how long would it take for it to fade? Lu Yin could not guess, but it might take a very, very long time. In other words, the innerverse and outerverse had already been separated. Lu Yin grew excited. No matter what, the various great powers of the innerverse had coiled around him like pythons, making it difficult for him to breathe. He had already prepared himself for the worst, but he had not expected such a drastic change in the heavens. If the innerverse had truly been isolated, then he would not have needed to escape. At this moment, Wendy Yushan appeared with a solemn expression. Sense the void. Lu Yin raised his hand and exerted a bit of force, causing the air to tremble. His expression changed and he exerted more force, but the air still trembled. Lu Yin's expression changed and he waved his hand. His enormous strength should have been able to tear through the void, but now, it only caused the air to distort and create a strong wind that swept through the void. Space itself did not change at all. How can this be? Lu Yin was stunned. Wendy Yushan solemnly replied, Space has changed. She unsheathed her sword and slashed out. A visible sword chi tore through the air and slashed into the distance, but space remained unchanged. The space has stabilized, Lu Yin said solemnly. Wendy Yushan nodded. Even with my strength, it's difficult to tear through the void. Perhaps only a hunter's destructive power can do so. Lu Yin, the world has changed. Where's Hai Chi-Chi? Wendy Yushan asked. Lu Yin sighed. She's hiding by herself. The innerverse and outerverse are separated, so she can't return to the Starfall Sea. She can't feel the Sea King's power either. Wendy Yushan's expression dimmed. She had experienced this feeling before and it was very uncomfortable. You should comfort her. Perhaps there's a gap in the astral river that she can travel back and forth. It's useless. The astral river arc has already been overturned. Even if the astral river returns to its original state, it'll still be very difficult to travel back and forth. At least we can't do it with our current strength. We'll need to be at least an enlighter. Lu Yin's expression suddenly changed. Enlighters could not travel back and forth from the astral river, and similarly, those enlighters had been left behind in the astral wilderness. Not all of the enlighters had returned to the innerverse, and there should still be some who had not. Lu Yin's heart sank when he thought of this. Once he confirmed that the inner verse and outer verse had been completely separated, it would mean that he had lost the protection of the Sea King's dome. Then those enlighters would be able to act against Frostwave Weave without restraint. After all, he had stolen quite a few star essence skins on planet Pyrolite, and there was also the temptation of a secret technique. Lu Yin felt apprehensive, and beside him Wendy Yushan seemed to have thought of something as well. The Great Yu Empire entered a state of alert, and all foreign spacecraft were strictly inspected. This was Lu Yin's order. The first few days should have been fine, as even enlighters would need some time to confirm the situation in the astral river. However, after a dozen days the atmosphere in the outerverse changed. First, the dark mist weave, which was closest to the astral river, experienced a huge change. One of the organizations was destroyed by an enlighter, and soon after several more organizations were destroyed. This incident was like a primer that led to the beginning of the upheaval. Lu Yin's heart sank when he heard the news, and he immediately returned to King Zishan's palace to roll his die. He wanted to roll enhance so that he could upgrade his money bomb universal armor and gun to the point where they could threaten an enlighter. Hua Qingshan and the rest were all waiting on Xenu Star, and it wouldn't be long before an enlighter appeared. Back in King Zishan's palace, Lu Yin stayed in a secret room and blocked the monkey. He raised his hand and his die appeared. He tapped it, causing it to spin rapidly. When it stopped spinning, Lu Yin saw -6. His vision suddenly darkened, but then it suddenly became clear again. Lu Yin sighed in relief. Fortunately, he had placed his cosmic ring to the side in advance. If he rolled enhance and ran out of star crystals or star essences, he would withdraw. Now that he had rolled enhance, it wouldn't be easy for him to roll enhance. He used a cube of star crystals to restore the die and then tapped it again. The die spun rapidly and finally stopped at enhance. Lu Yin sighed. Indeed, after rolling enhance, it wouldn't be easy for him to roll enhance again. There was a thump, and he randomly obtained an item from a cosmic ring. Lu Yin had obtained many strange things in the past, including women's clothing and stones. This time, however, he obtained a blood-red bell the size of a thumb. Lu Yin frowned as he looked at the bell on the ground. He felt very uncomfortable, as if his entire body had been grabbed by something and his blood was boiling. He picked up the bell, and the moment it touched his hand, his body trembled. His entire body turned cold and stiff, and he hurriedly stored it away in his cosmic ring. What the hell was this? It seemed even stranger than progenitor Wushang's hide. However, it should be something good. At least it was better than the stones and women's clothing. Thank you, Silas. Thank you, brother. Cool breeze. Brother's tip: I'll update at 3 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, brothers, for your support. Chapter 530. He still had 2 more chances, and he would roll either 4 pips or 3 pips. Otherwise he would have to wait for a while. However, things did not go according to his wishes. Both times he rolled a pip, and the first time he obtained a weapon with a decent design. The second time he obtained a pair of pants, which made him so angry that he burned them. He had already rolled 4 times, but his luck was too bad. He could only wait for 10 days and hope that nothing would happen during that time. In the astral wilderness, a flaming warship headed towards Frostwave Weave with cultivators from the Blaze Realm on board. The Blaze Realm had only managed to obtain a limited amount of pyrolite during this contest for pyrolite, and the most fundamental reason for this was that Lu Yin had killed Jared, which had caused the Blaze Realm's late-stage experts to be unable to keep up. Furthermore, the person who was supposed to be there did not show up, which infuriated Hua Haoi. That person had only arrived after the contest on planet Pyrolite had ended. Lily Rose was that person. She was beautiful and ruthless, and more importantly, she was ranked 31st on the top 100 rankings. Unfortunately, Lu Yin and the others had already left by the time she arrived at planet Pyrolite. At this moment, Lily Rose was lazily leaning against the wall of the warship, revealing her long snow-white legs as she stared into space. The weather has changed and I can't go back to the innerverse. I wonder if there are any interesting people in the outerverse. She then thought of Hua Haoi and smiled. Wendy Yushan will probably disappear from the top 100 rankings soon, and I'll be able to enter the top 30. Unfortunately, Lu Yin is an interesting man. Senior sister? A surprised voice rang out, and Lily Rose turned around to see a fair-skinned youth with a strange look in his eyes. "Senior sister, it's me. Do you remember me? You were the one who brought me to the Blaze Realm when I was young." The youth happily ran over to Lily Rose and looked at her fervently. Lily Rose blinked and licked her lips, revealing a seductive expression. "Is that so?" The youth's heartbeat quickened and he gulped. "There were 1,000 of us back then, so it's normal that you don't remember. Senior sister, where have you been all these years? There has been no trace of you in the Blaze Realm." Lily Rose smiled and raised a finger, and under the youth's shocked gaze she lifted his chin and slowly approached him. "Junior brother, I'm very tired. Can you let me lean on you for a while?" The young man's eyes glazed over and he swallowed again. His eyes unconsciously swept over Lily Rose's body. Her exquisite curvy figure released a tempting fragrance, and her bright red dress was extremely beautiful, making the young man speechless. With a faint smile, Lily Rose's lips moved closer. The young man only felt warmth and was wrapped in indescribable beauty. His hands unconsciously wrapped around Lily Rose's slender waist. At the border of Frostwave Weave, a fleet was patrolling. Everything seemed normal at first, but in the next instant, endless flames spread out and burned the entire fleet to ashes. A figure flitted across the void and stared ahead with a fierce gaze. On Xenu Star, Lu Yin felt a headache coming on as he looked at the pile of memorials in front of him. He had no idea how Undying Yushan had dealt with all of this in the past. The Great Yu Empire was huge and it spanned 13 filaments. Countless incidents had occurred and now more than half of Frostwave Weave had been affected. Lu Yin had already handed over most of the memorials to the others, but there were still a lot left for him. He couldn't find Wendy Yushan, which was a result of her experience. She must have known that he would face such a situation and left him behind while she ran off. Lu Yin sighed and opened one of the memorials. It required Lu Yin's approval on whether or not he needed to use military force to suppress the rebels on a certain planet. Lu Yin could do so without further ado. The next one was for him to approve reinforcements to a certain filament, which gave him a headache. He really couldn't take it anymore. If he was trapped in a pile of memorials, he wouldn't be able to do anything. No, he had to find someone to deal with this. However, most of the Great Yu Empire's courtiers were still the same batch as Undying Yushans, and aside from a few people, the rest of them were disgusting to Lu Yin. Lu Yin could not accept their ugly behavior when they faced Karthika. "It's time for a test to pick out talented people to handle government affairs," Lu Yin muttered to himself before burying himself in the pile of memorials once more. Suddenly his gadget beeped. Lu Yin looked at it and his expression changed. He immediately contacted Banjiu to activate Xenu Star's defenses. Lu Yin leaped into the sky, followed by Huqingshan, Peach, Rocky Anna and the rest. They all looked at the sky with solemn expressions. They had all received reports that all of the fleets along the line from North Castle Weave to Frostwave Weave had been annihilated and devoured by a sea of flames. That line was headed straight for Xenu Star. The situation that they had been most worried about had finally occurred. A powerhouse had attacked Frostwave Weave and it had already caused great losses. It was unrealistic to try to evacuate the people on Xenu Star at this time. If the other party was an enlighter, they would be able to move very quickly. Lu Yin's expression darkened and he rubbed his cosmic ring. It seemed that he still couldn't avoid it. The powerhouse who had attacked this time was very likely an enlighter. The flames were most likely from the Blaze Realm's enlighter Huahui. Wendy Yushan appeared and looked at Lu Yin solemnly. Next, Banjiu appeared and an invisible energy barrier appeared around Xenu Star. Even the 3 ring continents were enveloped by this energy barrier. This was Xenu Star's strongest defense, and it had been created by Undying Yushan when he was still in power. It was said that it could even block a peak hunter's attack. Along the way, we've detected the power level feedback. The enemy isn't far from Xenu Star, Banjiu said solemnly. The entire Xenu Star entered a state of combat readiness. A few hours later, the energy barrier around Xenu Star turned bright red, and an incomparably terrifying pressure spread out and roasted the entire planet. The people on Xenu Star trembled in fear as the temperature of the atmosphere rose, and even the oceans began to evaporate. Huahui stood in outer space and looked down. He raised a hand and a giant palm of flames pressed down. With a boom, the 3 ring continents began to crumble and the energy barrier shattered. Lu Yin donned his universal armor and took out his money bomb, aiming it at Huahui. At the same time, Xianxia, the blind monk, and the rest acted at the same time, sending countless attacks towards Huahui. Huahui sneered. "I'll show you what it means to be an enlighter." He then swept his hand through the void, causing layers of ripples to appear. Suddenly, the void split open and all of the attacks were sucked into the void and disappeared. Although the sky had changed, an enlighter could still tear through the void. This was the power of an almighty being. At that moment, all of the devices on Xenu Star that were used to measure power level exploded. Huahui had displayed an unparalleled strength. The Great Yu Empire had never provoked an enlighter before. Even Luing Zishan, Peach and the others had never encountered such a terrifying power. The pressure that this power brought about made them lose the courage to resist. Lu Yin's money bomb attack was also useless against Huahui. Huahui stepped forward and appeared in front of Lu Yin and the rest. He waved his hand, causing flames to burn the void. The two hunters, Xianxia and the blind monk, immediately stepped forward to block the attack, but they were blasted away by the flames. Lu Yin stood in front of the group and stared at Huahui. A jade stone suddenly appeared in his hand. As long as he crushed it, Mr. Mu would appear. Hold on, Lu Yin suddenly remembered that the inner verse and outer verse had been separated. Could Mr. Mu appear? When he thought of this, his face turned pale. If Mr. Mu could not appear, then he could only try to contact Granny Chan from the North Line Flow Zone. North Line Flow Zone owed him a promise. Huahui looked at Lu Yin coldly. "Brat, weren't you very arrogant on planet Pyrolite? You killed my Blaze Realms experts, chased away the Day-Night clan and Sword Sex experts, and even fought against someone on the top 100 rankings. What now?" Lu Yin's eyes flickered and he was bewildered. Wendy Yushan spoke up. "Huahui, you want the secret technique, right?" Huahui looked at Wendy Yushan with desire and greed in his eyes. "That's right. I'll go with you on the condition that you don't hurt anyone else. Otherwise, I'd rather kill myself so that you can never obtain the secret technique," Wendy Yushan said indifferently. Lu Yin pulled Wendy Yushan back. "No." Peach and the rest spoke up as well. Wendy Yushan pushed Lu Yin away and stared at Huahui. Huahui thought about it for a moment. Compared to the importance of the secret technique, these people's lives were worthless to him, and he was also afraid that something would go wrong. "And I agree. I won't hurt anyone else. Come with me." Wendy Yushan's eyes dimmed and she looked at Lu Yin. "Take care of yourself." Lu Yin's expression was resolute, and he was about to crush the jade when Hai Chi-Chi, who had been hiding, appeared. She calmly looked at Huahui. "Frostwave Weave is under the protection of the Sea King's dome. Have you forgotten?" Huahui smiled and shook his head. "Little girl, I know that you're the Sea King's daughter, but now that the inner verse and outer verse have been separated, the Sea King's dome can't extend its reach into Frostwave Weave. Besides, even if the inner verse and outer verse weren't separated, the Sea King would still have offended the entire inner verse by stealing Pyrolite. The Sea King's dome won't have a good time either." Hai Chi-Chi looked up. "The Sea King's dome is a man of his word. He said that Frostwave Weave is under the protection of the Sea King's dome, so he won't allow anyone to act presumptuously." Then a blue light bloomed from her body, and the Sea King's trident appeared in her hand. Lu Yin's pupils shrank as he recognized the Sea King's trident. What had appeared in Hai Chi-Chi's hand was definitely the Sea King's trident, even if it was just an illusion. The moment the Sea King's trident appeared, everyone on Xenu Star felt an unparalleled power. This power far surpassed Huahui's, and it dispersed the heat waves that had been roasting Xenu Star. Huahui stared at the Sea King's trident in shock. This is the Sea King's power." Hai Chi-Chi raised her spear. "Retreat or die." Huahui immediately retreated without hesitation as he had sensed a fatal danger. This was definitely the Sea King's power, and he had never thought that the Sea King could merge his own power into another person's body. This power was enough to kill Huahui. Sometimes the longer a person lived, the more they did not want to die. Huahui was one such person. Regardless of whether or not Hai Chi-Chi had the power to kill an enlighter, he did not dare to take the risk. It was no wonder why the Sea King had said that Hai Chi-Chi did not need his protection. It turned out that she had the Sea King's power within her body. Wait, didn't she say that she could not sense the Sea King's power? Could it be that the reason why she could sense the Sea King's power was because of the power that the Sea King had merged into her body? If that was the case, then this power was as much as it had been consumed, and there was no way to replenish it. Lu Yin hurriedly had Hai Chi withdraw her power. Third update, thank you. Chapter 531. Hai Chi's body swayed and the blue halo disappeared. Her face was pale and she looked much weaker than before. Lu Yin hurriedly supported her but she pushed him away and left on her own. Banjiu stepped forward. That person is already heading towards North Castle Weave. He didn't stop. Lu Yin nodded. Hua Haoyi had been scared out of his wits and he was too afraid of death. Wendy Yushan said, "Go comfort her. She saved us." Lu Yin grunted. "I'll leave the rest to you." He then chased after Hai Chi. Hai Chi arrived at the shore which had already collapsed. Much of the sea had been evaporated by Hua Haoyi's power, and it was still steaming. Hai Chi reached into the sea with a melancholic expression. Lu Yin appeared behind her as this was the first time he had seen Hai Chi like this. She had grown up overnight after the Sea King's accident. Just like before, she had shouldered the promise of the Sea King's dome, and she was no longer the venomous girl who liked to insult others. In the past, I always thought that father was the greatest person in the universe. There was nothing that he couldn't solve and there was no one who dared to oppose him, Hai Chi said dejectedly. Lu Yin sat down beside her and looked at her. The Sea King is indeed powerful, but the boundaries of the universe can never be seen. No one is invincible, but I believe that nothing will happen to the Sea King. Hai Chi raised her hand, and the blue halo flickered before disappearing. Father's power is gone. Lu Yin was puzzled. The Sea King only fused that much power into your body? Hai Chi hugged her knees. That person was an enlighter. Lu Yin understood. The Sea King had indeed fused a lot of power into Hai Chi's body, but her body's ability to withstand it had to be considered. At most he could fuse power that could threaten an enlighter and it would be gone after a single use. Before I left, I asked father what would happen if his power was gone. Hai Chi looked up with red eyes. Father told me that he would know if it was gone and he would come and get me. She paused as tears streamed down her face. I also asked second brother what would happen if father didn't come. Second brother said that regardless of whether it was father, eldest brother, or himself, as long as I said the word, they would immediately appear. No matter how dark the universe is, I'm not afraid. Hai Chi raised her gadget and tried to contact Hai Dashao, but she could no longer contact him. The inner verse and outer verse had been separated and the network had been cut off as well. All connections with the inner verse had been severed. Hai Chi buried her head in her arms, appearing very helpless. She no longer had a home, especially when the Sea King's dome was facing a crisis. She could not do anything and she did not know anything. Lu Yin had experienced this feeling before and he understood her helplessness. However, there was nothing he could do as he did not have the ability to make any promises. Even an old freak with a power level in the hundreds of thousands would not be able to break through the Astral River's seal, let alone Lu Yin. Perhaps this parting would last for countless years, and Hai Chi would never be able to return to the Sea King's dome. She knew it herself, so she grew up. Lu Yin placed a hand on her head. I promise you that I'll send you back to the Sea King's dome, even if there's only the slightest possibility. Hai Chi was silent. News of Hua Haoyi's retreat from Xenu Star had been purposely spread by Lu Yin's subordinates to intimidate other enlighters. Hua Haoyi was not the only enlighter who coveted the secret technique, and the Blaze Realm was not the only organization that had a grudge against Lu Yin. He wanted to use this matter to stabilize himself for a period of time. 2 days later, Banjiu found Lu Yin and took the blueprint that Lu Yin had given him. His expression changed as soon as he looked at it. Royal Regent, where did you get this blueprint? It had been dropped when the die had been rolled. Lu Yin calmly replied, it was a coincidence. How is it? Is it useful? Banjiu excitedly replied, do you know what this blueprint is? This is the blueprint for the most advanced androids in the universe. There are 9 androids in total, and it describes their strength and manufacturing methods in all aspects. Lu Yin was puzzled. You've always been in the Great U Empire, so how do you know that this is the most advanced androids in the universe? Because of this. Banjiu pointed at the bottom right corner of the blueprint, where there was a symbol that Lu Yin could not understand. Banjiu excitedly explained, "This is the symbol of a research team in the technocracy that was left behind. When I was traveling the universe, I went to the edge of the technocracy and accidentally learned of some things. There are many research teams in the technocracy and each of them has their own armed forces. They are similar to the various large organizations in the human domain, and this symbol represents one of the more advanced research teams." Lu Yin nodded. "Are the androids powerful?" "Very powerful. According to the blueprint, these androids can be upgraded without limit, unlike the current androids that are heavily restricted. These androids are not restricted and they can be upgraded as long as they have the materials." Banjiu was excited, but there was also a trace of disbelief in his voice. This manufacturing method was too novel and full of illusions, but it had actually succeeded. Lu Yin did not understand this, but he had seen the technocracy's androids and they were indeed powerful. However, they were the crystallization of the technocracy's most advanced technology, and he did not believe that this blueprint represented the most advanced technology. If it did, how could it be casually placed in a cosmic ring? Then go ahead and research it. If you can create androids, then it will also increase the Great U Empire's strength. Banjiu could sense that Lu Yin did not have high expectations, but he was not anxious either. As long as he could create androids, then the royal regent's attitude would definitely change. Only someone like Banjiu who could understand the blueprint would know the results in advance. Banjiu was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something, and his expression turned solemn. "Royal Regent, the outer verse is about to descend into chaos. Please make early preparations." Lu Yin was puzzled. "How do you know that the outer verse is about to descend into chaos?" Banjiu replied, "Space exploring powerhouses have a period of decline. Before the inner verse and outer verse were separated, the inner verse powerhouses had their own organizations to support them, so they did not have to worry about the resources they would need during this period of decline." But no. Banjiu did not finish his sentence, but Lu Yin had already guessed it. That's right, those explorers, cruisers, hunters, and even enlighters did not have the resources of their organizations to support them, so they would face a period of decline. In order to avoid that period of decline, they would crazily plunder resources. Why hadn't he thought of this before? No space-exploring powerhouse would want to face a period of decline. Only by seizing a certain amount of resources would they be able to safely wait for the inner verse and outer verse to reconnect. Ordinary powerhouses would be fine, but enlighters required a terrifying amount of resources. If that was the case, then the outer verse would indeed descend into chaos. Even the Great U Empire's resources might not be enough to satisfy an enlighter. How many enlighters were currently trapped in the outer verse? Even if a weave supported just one, the surrounding weaves would be crippled. Furthermore, how could the surrounding weaves be willing to support these enlighters? If they could not obtain resources, then these powerhouses would only have one method, which was to plunder them, which would be equivalent to declaring war. Previously, Lu Yin had only considered the allure of secret techniques to enlighters, but now he had to consider resources as well. Hai Chi-Chi's deterrence would not be enough to protect the Great U Empire for too long, and it was only a matter of time before the Great U Empire would face the plundering of other powerhouses. Grand Top Weave, Lars Weave, and other weaves might already be facing plundering. No, he had to quickly gain the ability to protect himself. A few days later, while Lu Yin was waiting for his dye to recover, he received news that Grand Top Weave's 9-stack sect had been destroyed. The sect's strongest hunter had been killed and the rest had been scattered. The sect's resources had also been plundered clean by an enlighter. Not long after, there were other tragic cases of other organizations being plundered. Aside from Frostwave Weave, the surrounding weaves had all fallen into a quagmire of war, and it had all been one-sided. Against an enlighter, those organizations were like paper and were easily destroyed. Lu Yin grew more and more anxious, and he finally returned to King Zishan's palace after 10 days. He took out his die and tapped it with a look of intense anticipation. Aside from the battle with Qingyu on Earth, he had never been so excited before, as this was a matter of life and death. This time his luck was quite good and he immediately rolled 3 pips. When he saw the 2 screens appear, Lu Yin heaved a sigh of relief. It was time to go all out. As he thought about it, he took out his remaining 4 money bombs. He had upgraded 3 money bombs in the past, and he had given one to Wendy Yushan and one to Huahui. He still had one left, but this time he wanted to upgrade all of them to the peak. He remembered that upgrading the money bomb had made him feel uneasy, and he had spent dozens of star essence. He tossed the upgraded money bomb onto the screen and then tossed in 100 star essence. He was rich and he could do whatever he wanted. The money bomb dropped twice and it had been upgraded twice. Lu Yin's eyes filled with star energy, and he saw that the rune lines had become extremely large. This proved that this money bomb had a huge effect on the universe, but it was still far from reaching Huahui's level. He tossed in another 100 star essence, but unfortunately the money bomb did not upgrade completely. He gritted his teeth and tossed in 1,000 star essence. The money bomb had been upgraded twice, which meant that it had been upgraded 4 times. At this point, the number of rune lines within the money bomb was about the same as Huahui's, which meant that this money bomb had the destructive power of an enlighter. Lu Yin was excited as the money bomb had been upgraded from its initial state to its current state. He had already spent 1,250 star essence, but it still wasn't enough. He needed a destructive power that could instantly kill an enlighter. As he thought about it, he tossed in 2,000 star essence and upgraded the money bomb twice. As he looked at the money bomb, Lu Yin saw a terrifying number of rune lines. He had never seen so many rune lines in his entire life, and in terms of power he estimated that it could rival 270,000 to 80,000. If he caught an enlighter off guard, it should be able to heavily injure or even kill him. Lu Yin carefully put the money bomb away and calculated that upgrading it to its current state had cost him 3,300 star essence. He still had 3 more money bombs, and upgrading them all would require over 10,000 star essence. No, he didn't have enough money. He was speechless, as no matter how much he earned, it would never be enough. However, he had no other choice, as he had to change his target to an enlighter. There was no such expert in the entire Frostwave Weave, and he had to pay 3,000 star essence to fight against an enlighter. This was the price he had to pay. He suppressed his desire to upgrade all of the money bombs and instead took out his universal armor. Compared to offense, defense was also very important. His current universal armor was not strong enough to defend against an enlighter's power, so he had to furiously upgrade it. Chapter 532. The universal armor had been upgraded 5 times, but it still wasn't enough to withstand an enlighter's attack. Lu Yin placed the universal armor on the upper screen and then tossed in 1,000 star essence. He realized that he was spending more and more extravagantly. He had risked his life to rob the Blackbeard pirates, but he had only managed to obtain a few thousand star essence, and now he was spending it all in an instant. 1,000 star essence had only been enough to upgrade the universal armor once, which was far more than what Lu Yin had expected, which was that it would only take 1 or 200 star essence to upgrade it. The cost of upgrading the universal armor from being able to withstand attacks with a power level of over 100,000 to over 200,000 was not a simple one. He tossed in another 2,000 star essence, which upgraded the universal armor by 1.5 times. It was stuck in the middle, so he tossed in another 700 star essence to upgrade the universal armor twice. Now the universal armor's appearance had changed and it gave off a cold aura. As for the number of rune lines, since the universal armor wasn't an offensive weapon, he couldn't tell how many there were. However, Lu Yin guessed that it should be able to withstand attacks with a power level of around 250,000. After all, he had spent almost 4,000 star essence on it. Still, this wasn't enough for Lu Yin, as he had a strong desire to survive. He tossed in another 2,000 star essence, but this time the universal armor hadn't even been upgraded once. He tossed in another 300 star essence to upgrade it once, which should be enough to withstand attacks with a power level of 270,000 to 280,000. That should be enough to deal with the Outerverse. Lu Yin's heart ached as he checked his cosmic ring. He still had 7,520 star essence left. He was spending money too quickly and his heart ached. He had gone from 10,000 star essence to 7,000 star essence, but he had only upgraded 2 items. At this moment he was very envious of Lulu. If the Mavis family's money was given to him, Then he could upgrade the universal armor to the point where even the collapse of the universe wouldn't be able to harm him. Unfortunately, he could only dream about it. He didn't know if the Mavis family was looking for a son-in-law, but he couldn't help but think about it. The last item to be upgraded had already been decided, and it was the gun. This gun had never been upgraded before. Every bullet had around 80,000 attack power, and there were still 20 bullets left. Upgrading the gun meant that there would be an overall increase of 20 attacks. He placed the gun on the upper screen, gritted his teeth and tossed in 3,000 star essence. The gun had been upgraded 4 times, which meant that it consumed more star essence than the money bomb or the universal armor. Even after upgrading the gun 4 times, Lu Yin could tell that its rune lines were only comparable to a hunter's. His heart sank as it seemed that he didn't have enough money to upgrade the gun to the point where it could threaten an enlighter. Lu Yin tossed out another 4,000 star essence and upgraded the gun 3 times. The number of rune lines now rivaled that of the money bomb. In other words, each attack had a power level of around 150,000, which was enough to instantly kill a normal hunter. He had spent more than 10,000 star essence to upgrade 3 items. He watched as the 2 screens disappeared and he felt a little dizzy. His money was gone and he only had 500 star essence left. Actually, there was one more thing that he really wanted to upgrade, and that was his formcast model. His current formcast model had been upgraded 5 times and he wanted to upgrade it to 6 times. Otherwise, the formcast model would disappear the moment he became an explorer, but he had no money. Money, money, money. He wasn't the only one who needed money. All of the powerhouses trapped in the Outerverse needed money. Money was the goal that everyone strived for. Those powerhouses needed money to survive, while Lu Yin needed money to protect himself. If he wanted to protect himself, then he would have to threaten those powerhouses' lives. This was a vicious cycle that he couldn't break free from. It was time for him to participate in a money-grabbing operation. As he walked out of King Zishan's palace, he bumped into Wendy Yushan. She didn't look too well, but her eyes lit up when she saw Lu Yin. "I'll leave those matters to you. I don't care." She then ran off. Lu Yin knew what she was talking about, but he didn't have the time to care. The next day, Lu Yin announced that the Great Yu Empire's defenses would be completely reduced and no one objected. The surrounding weaves had been attacked and some had even been wiped out. Frostwave Weave was temporarily safe because of the incident with Huahui, but that didn't mean that it would be safe forever. Powerhouses would appear sooner or later, and for now they could only reduce their defenses. The court session lasted for 3 hours and everyone in the Great Yu Empire was in a state of panic. The situation in the surrounding weaves made them apprehensive. After the court session, Lu Yin asked Xianxia, Banjiu, and the others to send people to the surrounding weaves to gather information. The network was still intermittent, so they couldn't get any information. They only knew that the surrounding weaves had been attacked, but no one knew the specifics or who had occupied them. Xianxia and the others assumed that Lu Yin was worried about being attacked, but in reality, Lu Yin was planning to participate. He couldn't be passive if he wanted to preserve his life, and only by participating could he protect himself. If a sheep transformed into a wolf, then a pack of wolves would be afraid of it and wouldn't easily attack it. However, the prerequisite was that the pack of wolves had to know that the sheep had transformed. Lu Yin was now waiting for the moment to transform into a wolf. He believed that it wouldn't be long before an enlighter attacked Frostwave Weave. That would be the moment he transformed into a wolf, and it would also be the time for him to participate in the plundering of resources. Frostwave Weave had been peaceful for a few months, but Lu Yin had already been cultivating for 5 years. 5 years had passed in the blink of an eye, and he had gone from an ordinary youth on Earth to a powerhouse at his current level. Everything had changed in the span of 5 years. A year ago he had still been climbing a mountain in the space with the Golden Ocean, and then he had met Mr. Mu who had increased his physical strength. Now the Innerverse and Outerverse had been completely separated, and he could only stay in the Great Yu Empire. He didn't know if he would ever be able to return to the Innerverse or if he would ever meet Mr. Mu again. A month ago he had felt like he was about to break through to the Explorer realm, but he had forcefully suppressed it. His previous experience had made him feel uneasy, and he didn't dare to break through without an absolute powerhouse by his side. However, there were no absolute powerhouses in the Outerverse at this moment. Lu Yin took out the jade and sighed. Perhaps even Mr. Mu couldn't travel through the astral river. Hai Chi had recovered over the past few months and was no longer sad, but she had also changed. The biggest difference from before was that she was no longer as sharp-tongued. Lu Yin missed the time when the monkey had mocked him for being cheap. "Seventh bro, I want to break through," the monkey suddenly said. Lu Yin was shocked. "You want to break through to the explorer realm?" "Yes, I've been stuck as a limiter for a long time and it's time for me to break through. If I do, you'll be able to roam the universe even without your universal armor because I'm your tamed beast." Lu Yin calmly replied, "If you want to break through, then break through. It doesn't matter. Even if you become a cruiser or a hunter, I can still easily suppress you." The monkey was speechless. "Seventh bro, can't you say something encouraging?" "I'm warning you not to try anything funny," Lu Yin said coldly. The monkey sighed. "Seventh bro, I've been with you for so many years. Why don't you trust me? I'm your tamed beast and my life and death are in your hands. There's no need to threaten me. Besides, you block me off every once in a while, which is immoral. You should really go to the Beast Tamer's flow zone and ask around to find out when tamed beasts can resist their masters." Lu Yin didn't want to listen to the monkey's nonsense. Other tamed beasts were controlled by the human, but the monkey was the opposite. Who knew if there would be any problems? Lu Yin wasn't willing to take such a risk. "Seventh bro, let's find a place so that I can break through," the monkey said. Lu Yin nodded, and just as he was about to head to a more remote location, his gadget suddenly rang. He glanced at it and his expression changed as his gaze turned cold. What had to come had finally come. Hai Chi's deterrence had lasted for a few months, which was pretty good, but he still couldn't escape this day. Ever since the Great Yu Empire had withdrawn all of its defenses a few months ago, Lu Yin had been well aware of all the happenings within the empire. Just now he had received a report that there was an extremely powerful presence that exceeded 200,000. This meant that an enlighter had appeared in the Great Yu Empire and was heading straight for Xinyu Star. There was even an image in the report, and although it was blurry, Lu Yin could still recognize it. It was an astral beast, and there was only one enlighter who had an astral beast: Karthika. Lu Yin immediately ordered his troops to not approach Karthika. He then contacted Xianxia and put on his universal armor. Not long after, Xianxia appeared with a solemn expression. "An enlighter has appeared. I'll take care of this matter, so take me to outer space," Lu Yin said. Xianxia didn't say anything and he silently led Lu Yin into outer space. At the same time, Xinyu Star activated its defenses once more, and Ban Jiao and the rest were ordered not to leave the star. Wendy Yushan looked worried and she couldn't help but look for Hai Chi. However, Hai Chi's answer was the same as it had been a few months ago. The Sea King's power had been used up and she was powerless to fight against an enlighter. Wendy Yushan also rushed into outer space. Without the Sea King's power, there was no way they could stop an enlighter. She planned to sacrifice herself in exchange for the safety of Frostwave Weave. In the dark depths of outer space, all sorts of spacecraft were ordered to land on nearby planets, and the area around Xinyu Star was cleared. Lu Yin and Xianxia quietly looked towards the north, and Wendy Yushan appeared behind them. Lu Yin knew that he couldn't stop her. "Let me try first. If I can't stop them, then I'll listen to you." Wendy Yushan looked at him and nodded. "All right." In the distance, there was a ripple in outer space as an intense pressure swept out. Many asteroids shattered and turned to dust as a colossal creature rapidly approached from afar and let out a deafening roar. Lu Yin's face turned solemn. Karthika had a tamed beast, which was a manifestation of his strength. His tamed beast had the power of an enlighter, and Karthika himself also had the power of an enlighter. Fighting against him was equivalent to fighting against two enlighters, which was much more troublesome than fighting against Huahui. As the giant astral beast approached, layers of ripples appeared in the void and spread out, causing the three rings around Xinyu Star to become unstable. To the people on Xinyu Star, this was the end of the world. Soon Lu Yin and the rest saw the astral beast clearly. It had the appearance of a continent, but it had no limbs. The roar came from within, and it really did seem like a continent was crushing down on them. Karthika stood on the astral beast's back and looked at Lu Yin's group with a smile. "Little brat, I told you that I would come looking for you." Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. Huahui was almost killed. Didn't he tell you? Chapter 533. Karthika sneered. So what? You're just a limiter. Even if you borrow the strength of a powerhouse, there's still a limit. Do you really think that we're so easily fooled? Today I'll massacre Xenu Star and make you pay for your previous actions. Lu Yin stepped forward. What if I tell you a secret? Karthika shook his head. Junior, I've lived for so long. Do you think that you can fool me with just a few words? Aside from secret techniques, I'm not interested in anything else. It's a secret technique. Lu Yin shouted. To the side, Wendy Yushan's body trembled and she looked at Lu Yin. Secret technique inheritances were not like battle techniques that could be recorded without limit. Every secret technique had a specific inheritance method, and only by using a specific method could the secret technique be preserved for the inheritor to learn. For example, Undying Yushan had only been able to create 2 inheritance chips for the Yu secret art, and he was unable to create any more. The Yo secret art was a secret technique that could only be passed down to a single person. Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin in confusion. Did he have more Yu secret art inheritance chips? Her father had not left behind 2 but 3? Karthika's eyes lit up as he stared at Lu Yin. The giant astral beast was less than 10,000 meters away from Lu Yin's group, and to the beast's enormous size, this distance was nothing more than an inch. In Karthika's eyes, Lu Yin's group was nothing more than ants. Karthika was a cautious person, and he would not give even ants a chance to turn the tables. He thought about it and shouted, if you hand over the secret technique and all of the Great Yu Empire's resources, I'll let you go and guarantee that the Blaze Realm will not cause trouble for you. Lu Yin's heart sank. This old man had allied himself with the Blaze Realm, which was troublesome. Even if he could deal with this old man, he would not be able to deal with Huahui. This was Karthika's goal. He wanted Lu Yin to be wary, even if he did not think that Lu Yin had the ability to threaten him. Is this a promise from Senior? Lu Yin asked loudly. Karthika laughed. Senior. Kid, you've only just learned to respect the strong, but it's not too late. Hand over the secret technique and I'll let bygones be bygones. Lu Yin shouted. All right, I'll hand over the secret technique. He then leapt up and charged at Karthika. Karthika looked at Lu Yin warily. Kid, don't try anything funny. Otherwise, countless people in the Great Yu Empire will be buried with you. Lu Yin took out a wrapped chip. This junior wouldn't dare. He slowly approached Karthika, stopping when he was 1,000 meters away. He then tossed the wrapped chip at Karthika. When Karthika saw that Lu Yin was no longer approaching him, he let down his guard. Even if this brat still had the Sea King's strength, it was impossible for him to instantly kill him without any time to react. Enlighters were not made of clay, and it was only when Lu Yin stopped and tossed the chip out that Karthika completely believed him. Without the protection of the Sea King's dome, this brat was just a limiter. At this moment, Karthika suddenly felt a sense of appreciation for talent. If he could recruit this kid into the second grade hall, then he would definitely become an absolute powerhouse in the future. Karthika reached out and grabbed the chip. He then tossed aside all distracting thoughts and eagerly opened the package to look at the chip. The moment the package was completely opened, Karthika's mind trembled and his mind went blank. Lu Yin suddenly accelerated towards Karthika, raised a hand and took out a money bomb. He aimed it at Karthika and fired. A beam of light exploded from the money bomb and pierced through Karthika's head. The remaining power of the bomb didn't diminish at all as it shot into the astral beast's body. A deafening howl shook the heavens and Lu Yin was unable to stand still. He looked up and saw Karthika's headless corpse. He grabbed progenitor Wushang's hide that was wrapped around the chip, but he did not care about it at all. He then leapt up and charged towards Xianxia and the others. The giant astral beast's howl reverberated throughout the heavens, causing an indescribable shockwave that caused hundreds of nearby planets to explode. Xianxia and Wendy Yushan immediately acted to block the shockwaves, but how could the shockwaves of an Enlighter's attack be so easily blocked? Xianxia spat out a mouthful of blood, and Wendy Yushan immediately used a secret technique to reverse the attack and attack the astral beast's body. However, the area in front of them was completely empty as the giant astral beast had disappeared. Everything had happened too quickly, and Xianxia did not even have time to react before Karthika died. That astral beast had been Karthika's tamed beast, and now that Karthika had died, the astral beast had naturally disappeared as well. Outer space was silent as Xianxia stared at Lu Yin in shock. A Lemaitre had killed an Enlighter. Wendy Yushan was just as shocked. On Xenu Star, Ban Jiu Shueshan Ana, and the others were all shocked speechless. An Enlighter had died just like that? Lu Yin panted heavily, but his eyes were filled with excitement. He had tricked Karthika to death, and he had mainly relied on progenitor Wushang's hide. He had used the hide to wrap up the chip and toss it to Karthika. No matter who it was, as long as they faced progenitor Wushang's hide, they would be stunned, but only for an instant. Since they had been 1,000 meters away, that instant was more than enough time for Lu Yin to kill Karthika. That money bomb had contained rune lines that could rival Hua Haoi's, so killing Karthika, who had mostly relied on his tamed beast, would not be a problem. This was the use of progenitor Wushang's hide. There was nothing that progenitor Wushang's hide could not stun, and if there was, then Lu Yin would use 2 pieces. In the distance, Karthika's headless corpse floated in outer space. Lu Yin did not have time to think, and he quickly rushed over and took out Karthika's cosmic ring. He dripped a drop of blood into it and opened it. He then took out everything from the ring and his eyes lit up with joy. Karthika's cosmic ring was very large, much larger than Lu Yin's own. There were many things inside, but the most important thing to Lu Yin was the star essence. There were more than 30,000 star essence inside, which meant that Lu Yin had struck it rich. If an Enlighter wanted to safely survive their waning period, they would need at least 60,000 star essence for each cycle, which was the minimum. If the second grade hall wanted to support an Enlighter like Karthika, they would have to spend an astronomical amount of resources, and this was based on how long it would take for Karthika to complete his cycle. Normal explorers would take 100 years, but Karthika had become an Enlighter, which meant that his innate gift was extremely high, and he could complete his cycle in less than 100 years. In other words, even if he only completed his cycle once every 100 years, the second grade hall would have to invest at least 60,000 star essence into him. Now that the second grade hall no longer existed, it would be far too difficult for Karthika to obtain enough star essence to support his cycle. This was also why the second grade hall was so eager to plunder the resources. The outer verse was different from the inner verse, and star essence rarely appeared in the outer verse. As he looked at the star essence that filled the void, Lu Yin hurriedly put it away. Most of the other items were medicine from Shamrock Enterprises, as well as many other items that he did not recognize. As an Enlighter, Karthika did not travel around often, so the items he had brought with him were not too complicated. Lu Yin had Xianxia send someone to pack up the items before returning to Xenu Star. From start to finish, Xianxia was in a state of shock. In the outer verse, Enlighters were extremely rare, and there was not even one in Frostwave Weave. Now one had actually been killed, which was too inconceivable. After returning to Xenu Star, Lu Yin said to Wendy Yushan, "I know that you have many questions, but I'll answer them in the future. For now you just have to trust me." Wendy Yushan looked at Lu Yin. "Who exactly are you?" Lu Yin's eyes flashed, but he did not reply. "That's not an outerverse weapon. There are no weapons in the outerverse that can instantly kill Enlighters. You have someone backing you, right?" Wendy Yushan asked. She had been pondering this question for a long time, ever since she had met Lu Yin in East San Dios. Lu Yin answered, "It's called a gold coin grenade. It's a weapon that one of Astral Ten's mentors sold me." Wendy Yushan looked into Lu Yin's eyes and then turned around. "You didn't answer me directly." She then left. Lu Yin watched Wendy Yushan's disappearing figure and fell into deep thought. How was he supposed to answer her? Was he supposed to tell her that he wasn't a descendant of the Zishan bloodline? He would think about it in the future. She only suspected that he had someone backing him, but she did not doubt the authenticity of his identity as a descendant of the Zishan bloodline. After all, the blood test from back then had been verified. Lu Yin would not hide the fact that Karthika had been killed. He had sent someone to spread the news of Karthika's death in order to intimidate the Enlighters. Karthika's death had been caused by the Sea King's strength. Hua Haoi was the first to hear the news, and his first reaction was disbelief. He tried to contact Karthika, but to no avail. When he thought back to Hai Chi Chi's strength, he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Fortunately he had not gone, or else he would have been the one to die. The Sea King's strength was unfathomable, and even an enlighter could be killed in an instant. However, there shouldn't be anyone else. Huahui wasn't sure, and he didn't want to take any risks for the time being. However, even if he didn't go himself, he could still find a hunter to try. Not many people had left the Outerverse at the time, and many powerhouses from the various great powers had remained in the astral wilderness. One after another they found out that Karthika had been killed, and they were all shocked by the Great Yu Empire's strength. Lu Yin's goal had been achieved, and he had joined the pack of wolves to plunder resources instead of being plundered. The Great Yu Empire had already scouted out the situation in the surrounding weaves. Lu Yin planned to roll his die again and roll Enhance, which would completely increase the gun's power to the point where it could threaten an enlighter. 20 shots would be equivalent to 20 enlighters' destructive power, and at that time he would have nothing to fear. Lu Yin decided to roll his die first. A few months ago he had only rolled it once before running out of money. Now that a few more months had passed, he should be able to roll Enhance again. The longer the interval, the greater the chance of rolling a rare point. 3 Enhance and 6 Enhance were the most difficult to roll. This time Lu Yin's luck was pretty good, and he rolled Enhance for the 4th time. The first 3 times he rolled Enhance for the first time, which resulted in a useless token. The second time he rolled Enhance, and the third time he rolled Enhance as well. Strangely, he didn't roll Enhance for the 4th time. This thing depended on luck. 2 screens appeared. Lu Yin had originally planned to upgrade the gun in one go, but after thinking about it he decided to play it safe and upgrade a money bomb first. A single money bomb was upgraded to the point where it could kill an enlighter, and it required a total of 3,300 star essence. Lu Yin still had 3 money bombs left, and after upgrading one he still had 29,000 star essence left, which should be enough to upgrade the gun. He threw in 5,000 star essence and upgraded the gun twice. The third upgrade got stuck in the middle, and Lu Yin threw in another 2,000 star essence to complete the third upgrade. Chapter 534. At this point, the number of rune lines within the gun was close to Karthika's own. Karthika was an enlighter, and his power was mainly reflected in his tamed beasts. Even so, he was still a bona fide enlighter. This gun already had the power to threaten an enlighter, but it still needed to be upgraded to the same level as the money bomb, which could instantly kill enlighters. It had already been upgraded 10 times, and the 11th upgrade had consumed more than 4,000 star essence. Lu Yin's scalp went numb as it was too expensive. 4,000 star essence was equivalent to 4 billion star crystals, and this was only the most basic exchange rate. 4 billion star crystals could not even be exchanged for 4,000 star essence. If this amount of money was converted into universal currency, it would be enough to cover the Great Yu Empire's military expenses for an entire year. In other words, Lu Yin had casually used up an entire year's worth of the Great Yu Empire's military expenses. Fortunately, I didn't count on the Great Yu Empire to make money. Otherwise, even if I emptied the entire empire, I wouldn't be able to upgrade it even once. Lu Yin sighed as he looked at the number of rune lines within the gun. No, it still wasn't enough. He needed to upgrade it even more. Lu Yin gritted his teeth and threw in another 6,000 star essence to upgrade the gun once more, but it still wasn't enough. Each attack was definitely powerful enough to threaten an enlighter, but it still wasn't enough to instantly kill Karthika. The 13th upgrade cost Lu Yin more than 10,000 star essence, and his hands were trembling. At this point, the number of rune lines within the gun had already reached an enormous level. Even if his eyes weren't filled with star energy, Lu Yin still felt terrified when he touched the gun. Each attack's power was equivalent to an upgraded money bomb, and if he caught Karthika off guard he would be able to instantly kill him. This was the most cost-effective upgrade. A single money bomb had cost 3,300 star essence to upgrade to this level, and 20 attacks were equivalent to 20 money bombs. If he wanted to upgrade all of them, he would need more than 60,000 star essence. At this point he had spent a total of 27,000 star essence to upgrade the gun, which was a huge savings. He had no more money to upgrade the gun. Lu Yin was speechless when he realized that he was out of money again. He only had 2,000 star essence left. Since when had 2,000 star essence become the standard for being poor? He remembered that he hadn't even earned that much when he had robbed the Blackbeard pirates, but it was still too little for what he wanted to upgrade. However, this money should be enough to upgrade his formcast model. When he'd first upgraded his 4-stage formcast model to a 5-stage one, it had only cost him 300,000 star crystals. He took out a formcast model from his body and placed it on the upper screen. He then tossed in 100 star essence, which was equivalent to 10 million star crystals, which should be enough. However, reality was completely different from what he had expected. The formcast model had only dropped a little and it was almost invisible. Lu Yin's eyes widened. How was that possible? Was it that difficult to raise it from 5 times to 6 times? Hai Chichi had mentioned that the Sea King was the one who had created the 6-stage formcast model. At the time he had guessed that perhaps only an emissary could create a 6-stage formcast model, but the difference was too great. The difference was already more than 30 times that of a normal formcast model, yet the difference was so small. Could it be that there was a fundamental difference between a 6-stage formcast model and a 5-stage formcast model? Only envoys could create them. The current Lu Yin was completely different from the Lu Yin of the past. Back when undying Yushan had died and several relatives were fighting for power, Xianxia had thought that whoever wanted to control the Great Yu Empire would have to have a good relationship with the Hua family. At that time, Xianxia had taken a liking to Lu Yin and even wanted to marry Hua Shaoling to strengthen their relationship. Now, however, he no longer dared to harbor such thoughts. Lu Yin had even killed an enlighter, so Xianxia's strength was not even worth mentioning. To the current Great Yu Empire, Lu Yin was equivalent to an enlighter. Not long after they entered the residence, Xianxia appeared and bowed to Lu Yin. Lu Yin raised a hand to stop him. "Uncle Hua, please forgive my intrusion." Xianxia smiled. "Your Highness is too serious. It's an honor for the Hua family to have you personally visit us." Lu Yin nodded and smiled as he looked around. Xianxia had Hua Shaoling take Hua Xiaoxiao away while he stayed by Lu Yin's side. "Your Highness, may I know why you've come?" Lu Yin smiled. "It's nothing. I'm just curious about a question that I'd like to ask Uncle Hua." "Please ask, Your Highness," Xianxia hurriedly replied, his attitude extremely respectful. It wasn't just him. In the entire Great Yu Empire, whether it was a cruiser or a hunter, was nothing more than an ant in front of Lu Yin. This was something that had been decided the moment Karthika had been killed. They no longer had an advantage in terms of cultivation, and facing Lu Yin was no longer like facing a junior. Lu Yin raised a hand and used his star energy to draw a symbol. It was an azure sphere with a pair of wings. The moment he saw the symbol, Xianxia's expression changed. Lu Yin suddenly pulled out his gun and pointed it at Xianxia's head. "Uncle Hua, tell me, what does this symbol mean?" Xianxia stared blankly at Lu Yin. "Your Highness, this subject does not know." "Is that so?" Lu Yin's gaze was icy. "I can kill Karthika and I can kill you as well. I remember that the Hua family has very few members. If you die, then there won't be many people left in the Hua family. Do you think that I'll let them off?" Xianxia's face went deathly pale as he could feel the power of the gun. The moment it was aimed at him, he felt as if his entire body had been encased in ice. This gun had the power to instantly kill him. After thinking about it for a while, Xianxia sighed. "Your Highness, how do you know about this symbol?" Lu Yin's gaze was piercingly cold. "I comprehended a domain." Xianxia's body trembled and he dejectedly replied, "Yes, a domain allows you to see everything. I underestimated Your Highness." Lu Yin did not speak and he merely stared at Xianxia cautiously. With his current strength, even Xianxia would not be able to kill him easily. He did not even need to wear his universal armor to threaten Xianxia. "This symbol is called Hidden Earth and it represents Earth," Xianxia said. Lu Yin was stunned. He had thought of many possibilities and he had even considered the possibility that this symbol represented some power in the Innerverse. The Hua family had been sent by an Innerverse power to monitor the Great Yu Empire, but he had never imagined that this symbol actually represented Earth. An azure sphere. Yes, Earth was an azure sphere. "Your Highness, I don't know why you changed your surname to Lu, but Lu is a primeval surname. Do you know what the primeval surname carries?" Xianxia looked at Lu Yin seriously. Lu Yin frowned. What does it have to do with the primeval surnames? Hua Qingshan's response was complicated. There are many people on Earth with the primeval surname. Even though it's already legal, this surname still carries heavy shackles and an ancient agreement. Our Hua family originates from Earth. Lu Yin was not surprised. This symbol represented Earth, so it was normal for Hua Qingshan to originate from Earth. I don't know how much time has passed, but in the distant past, perhaps tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago, this symbol already existed when a certain civilization on Earth was wiped out. What accompanied this symbol was an ancient agreement. Hua Qingshan solemnly looked at Lu Yin and continued, the primeval surname alliance. Lu Yin's expression changed and he stared blankly at Hua Qingshan. Earth's human civilization was wiped out several times and no one knew why. It was only when a cultivator from one of the erased civilizations accidentally saw this symbol on Jupiter that he realized what it meant. That cultivator went into hiding, and by the time he reappeared, that civilization had already been wiped out. Hua Qingshan paused for a moment before continuing. Even though the civilization was wiped out, the spark of humanity did not disappear. It was just that the civilization was pushed back to the primitive era, and the surnames did not disappear either. They were branded into the blood and soul, until one day the primeval surnames reappeared, accompanied by cultivators with extremely high innate gifts. Then, countless years later, the civilization was wiped out again and the cycle continued endlessly. Chapter 535. Lu Yin frowned. Didn't the Great Yu Empire notice? Hua Qingshan bitterly replied, so what if they did? They can't change anything and nobody can change anything. They can only save themselves. That cultivator who was lucky enough to escape would secretly travel to Earth every once in a while and pick out a few talented cultivators to join the hidden Earth Society to preserve their legacy. It's passed down from generation to generation, just like how Earth's civilization was wiped out. It's an endless cycle. Wait, what about the primeval surname alliance? Lu Yin asked. Hua Qingshan replied, it's an ancient alliance and the hidden Earth Society hasn't been able to find it for countless years. Just like Earth's civilization, it's been wiped out. How many people are there in this alliance? It's not people, it's a symbol. There are 18 symbols in the agreement found on Jupiter, and the hidden Earth Society symbol is one of them. However, we haven't been able to find any of them after countless years. I traveled the universe in search of this alliance and met His Majesty Undying Yushan, to represent the hidden Earth Society to the outside world. Hua Qingshan sighed in relief. This matter had been hidden for too long and nobody had listened to him speak. Does the Great Yu Empire have any records of Earth being wiped out? Lu Yin asked. Hua Qingshan shook his head. No one knows how Earth's previous civilization was wiped out, but all of us are certain that it was man-made. Someone is killing the primeval surnames. Lu Yin's heart sank. How can I be sure that you're telling the truth? Hua Qingshan's expression was complicated. The hidden Earth Society is hidden on Jupiter. You'll find out once you go there, but they won't meet you. The mastermind behind Earth's destruction hasn't appeared, and the hidden Earth Society definitely won't appear. I'll never be able to return to the hidden Earth Society either. Hua Qingshan then looked at Lu Yin. Your Highness, Earth has already entered an era of cultivation, and it won't be long before it's wiped out. Lu Yin's eyes flashed and he lowered his gun. I'll believe you for now. What experts does your organization have? Hua Qingshan smiled bitterly. There aren't any experts. The Hidden Earth Society only exists to preserve Earth's humanity and abide by the ancient agreement. They can't leave the heavens and their cultivation conditions are limited. There aren't any experts. Even if you find the alliance, it's useless. Lu Yin obviously didn't believe him. Hua Qingshan replied, I don't know about that. Perhaps the ancient agreement has some other meaning. Lu Yin's eyes twinkled. He wanted to make a trip to Earth and find this hidden Earth organization. He wanted to see what sort of ancient agreement they had. Hua Qingshan thought that he was a descendant of the Zishan clan and thought that his surname was fake. However, his surname was real. Even though he had lost his memory, Big Sis and the others knew that his surname was Lu the moment they saw him. It was not as simple as being imprinted in his blood. The surname Lu was him. If the so-called alliance was real, then his birthplace might have been destroyed like Earth. Only by searching for the truth of the primeval surnames could he search for his memories. Have you looked into the other primeval surnames all these years? Xianxia replied, I did. The Great Yu Empire has a lot of primeval surnames in the Outerverse, but it's the same as on Earth. Once these primeval surnames grow stronger, they'll immediately be wiped out. However, the power that wiped out the primeval surnames won't be completely wiped out. This feels like raising, Lu Yin muttered. Xianxia immediately replied, that's right. Rearing them is like being reared. Once they reach a certain scale, the slaughter will begin. Where are the primeval surnames that were recently wiped out? Lu Yin asked. Xianxia replied, in the 12th filament, the Wang family. This family ruled over several planets and gave birth to many talented disciples. The strongest person was extremely close to becoming an enlighter, but they were wiped out 10,000 years ago. Now the entire Wang family has changed their surname. They've left the primeval surnames. Lu Yin suddenly thought of Zhang Dingtian and the others. Were you the ones who took Zhang Dingtian by Zhou Xian and Saruzin? Xianxia shook his head. You could say that, but not necessarily. The people who took them were indeed from the Hidden Earth Society, but they weren't in hiding. Not everyone in the Hidden Earth Society agreed to go into hiding. Some left the Frostwave Weave in search of a chance to survive. These people were also looking for talented disciples. Zhang Dingtian, Zhou Xian and Saruzin aren't primeval surnames, but they're from Earth. Bai Shui is one of them, and all four were taken away separately. Lu Yin nodded as his suspicions from all those years ago had finally been resolved. He had been wondering why all four of them had disappeared at the same time. However, if they had been able to take Zhang Dingtian to the Starfall Sea, then their strength was definitely not simple. They were much more daring than the members of the Hidden Earth Society who had gone into hiding. Who were the people who took them away? Lu Yin asked. Xianxia shook his head. I don't know. Over the years, many members of the Hidden Earth Society have left Jupiter. Some are dead and some are still alive. We don't know who they are, but they left behind the symbol of the Hidden Earth Society. However, one thing is for sure. These people will never be able to return to Jupiter. Those who aren't recognized by the Hidden Earth Society can't enter Jupiter. They can't enter Jupiter, or are they not allowed to? Lu Yin stared at Xianxia with a burning gaze. Xianxia solemnly replied, they can't enter. Jupiter should be the final hiding place for the people who founded the Hidden Earth Society. They can see it, but they can't enter. As for what level of powerhouses they can stop, I don't know. Lu Yin frowned. It seemed that it was impossible to enter Jupiter. His weapon could kill enlighters, but it couldn't raise his own strength to that level. Xianxia was useless as he couldn't enter the planet himself. After chatting with Xianxia for a while longer, Lu Yin left the Hua family's residence. Xianxia watched Lu Yin's departing figure and relaxed. In the end, Lu Yin had revealed the truth. Earth had already entered an era of cultivation, and after so many years, they had discovered a common point. Once the primeval surnames became stronger, they would be exterminated. There were no exceptions, as Earth had already produced a few talented disciples. Once a powerhouse who was close to becoming an enlighter appeared, the entire planet would be exterminated. And this powerhouse who was closest to becoming an enlighter was Lu Yin. He might very well be the fuse that led to Earth's extermination. But so what? The Hidden Earth Society had watched as Earth's civilizations were exterminated generation after generation without intervening. They had already become numb, and they didn't even dare to take a look at who the culprit was. They only wanted to passively wait for the so-called ancient agreement to be fulfilled. Although Xianxia was a member of the Hidden Earth Society, he would never be allowed to step onto Jupiter. He had long since accepted that extermination was nothing he could do to stop it. He could only hope that this person could bring about a different outcome. Lu Yin walked out of the Hua clan's residence. He didn't completely believe Xianxia's words, but they still had a certain degree of credibility. He headed to the Imperial Capital's database to search for information on Earth, and the results were not unexpected. It was recorded that Earth's civilization had been exterminated, and it had happened more than once. However, there was no detailed explanation as to why it had been exterminated. He also searched for information on the Wang family in the 12th filament, and it was the same as what Xian had said. He couldn't get any more information from the database, so it seemed like it was time for him to make a trip to Earth. That seemingly ordinary planet seemed to be hiding a huge secret. But why wasn't anyone looking for him? If those who had left the Hidden Earth Society had been able to bring Zhang Dingtian to the Starfall Sea, then they definitely had the ability to find him. Could it be because of his current identity? Lu Yin felt helpless as his identity as a member of the Xian family had deceived everyone. Innate gifts were 1 in a billion, and it was abnormal for multiple people to appear on Earth at once. Lu Yin summoned the blind monk and had him tear through the void to head to the first ring of the continent where Yu Academy was located. He wanted to meet the youths from Earth. Lu Yin looked at the tower in the distance with a sigh. It had been a long time since he'd been here. Wait here, Lu Yin instructed before charging towards the tower. He remembered that the tower was Jerbaka's territory and that he'd fought him there. Several years had passed in the blink of an eye. The tower was surrounded by the ocean, so Lu Yin didn't move too quickly. Not far away, several students from Yu Academy had charged into the ocean and were fighting with the creatures there. The surface of the ocean was quickly dyed red. Lu Yin casually glanced around, but just as he was about to leave, he heard a cry of surprise. Lu Yin. Lu Yin stopped as the voice sounded familiar. He turned around and saw a woman leaping out from the sea, standing on the surface of the water as she looked at him excitedly. Zhao Yu. Lu Yin was stunned. This girl was Zhao Yu, one of the 3 snow maidens of Camp Blue who had been under Bai Shue's command on Earth. During the early days of the apocalypse, she had traveled across the continent from Camp Blue to Jinlin and had fought with Lu Yin. This girl had left a deep impression on him. The people around Zhao Yu watched as Lu Yin slowly descended, their eyes filled with excitement. It was actually the royal regent, the strongest Lamiter in the universe, who had instantly killed an enlighter and created a legend. To the people of the Great Yu Empire, Lu Yin was a legend, and his experiences had been filmed by many film companies. Being able to see Lu Yin up close was a huge blow to these youths. Lu Yin hadn't expected to see Zhao Yu here, but he remembered that she had been one of the people who had entered Yu Academy from Earth. It wasn't just her. There were also Feng Hong, Huan Sha, Luo Yi, Qin Xian, and a few other familiar faces. Zhao Yu looked at Lu Yin excitedly. It really is you. Lu Yin sized her up. I didn't expect to see you here. How have you been? Greetings, Your Highness. The Yu Academy students around Zhao Yu immediately bowed. Zhao Yu pursed her lips, remembering that the person in front of her was no longer the same cultivator from Earth. He was the ruler of the Great Yu Empire, the strongest Lamiter in the universe, and a legend who could instantly kill a powerhouse. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Lu Yin had the Yu Academy students leave and then looked at Zhao Yu. I didn't expect you to leave Earth. Zhao Yu gritted her teeth and slowly bowed. Greetings, Your Highness. Lu Yin laughed. You've changed. I still remember your heroic spirit when you traversed the apocalypse alone. Chapter 536. Zhao Yu looked at Lu Yin with a complicated expression. Your Highness, can you tell me where Luo Xing or Bai Shui is? Many of our sisters in Camp Blue want to know about her. Lu Yin thought about it. I don't know. Zhao Yu was disappointed. She had heard that Bai Shui, Zhang Dingtian, and the others had gone missing on Earth, which was why she had come to Yu Academy. She wanted to find out if they had really gone missing or if they had met with some accident, but there had been no progress. The Great Yu Empire was much more complicated than she had imagined. Even the first ring of the continent was difficult for her to leave, let alone find out about Bai Shui's whereabouts. I don't know where Bai Shui is, but she should be safe, Lu Yin couldn't help but say when he saw Zhao Yu's sad expression. Zhao Yu trembled and looked at him hopefully. Your Highness, you know where she is, right? Please tell me, I beg you. Lu Yin shook his head. I don't need to lie to you. I really don't know, but I saw Zhang Dingtian. He's doing well. Luo Xing is with Zhang Dingtian? Zhao Yu was delighted. Lu Yin thought about it. Should be. Zhao Yu sighed in relief. Lu Yin was too vague. Zhang Dingtian was more real to Earthlings, and as long as Luo Xing was with him she should be fine. Thank you for telling me, Your Highness, Zhao Yu said gratefully. Lu Yin helped her up. How's Earth? Zhao Yu respectfully replied, the zombies have been completely cleared out, and Earth has entered a new state of development. Many people have embarked on the path of cultivation, and the Great Yu Empire has also set up schools on Earth to select talented students. We are the first batch of candidates. Can we keep up with Yu Academy's progress? Lu Yin asked. Zhao Yu's gaze dimmed. We can't keep up, but the others will soon surpass the other students. Zhao Yu was only a sentinel and her strength was mediocre, which was normal compared to the Outerverse. She also had no innate gift and would probably remain a melder for the rest of her life. Moreover, she would be a wandering soldier without a form caste model. She had only joined Yu Academy because of him, but Lu Yin was curious about the others, especially those who had awakened innate gifts. It was too abnormal for a planet to have several cultivators with innate talents to awaken. Moreover, there was a monster like Zhang Dingtian. Putting aside what kind of fortuitous encounters Zhang Dingtian had in the Greyweed continent, his current strength was definitely close to Lu Xiaoqiu's. It was quite abnormal. One had to know that Lu Xiaoqiu had been cultivating since young and had endless resources, but Zhang Dingtian had only started cultivating halfway. Zhao Yu replied, Qin Xian is the strongest in our group. She's awakened her innate gift, solution. Although she's only a sentinel, her body has been remodeled, and she's regained her strength through cultivation. I'm sure she'll break through to the Melder realm soon. Next is... After listening to Zhao Yu speak for a while, quite a few people approached from the distance. One of them flew through the sky towards Lu Yin and landed not far from him. Greetings, Royal Regent. Lu Yin smiled. There's no need to be polite. You didn't go easy on me back then. Zherbok immediately protested. I didn't take advantage of you back then. Your Highness even learned the Sky Beast Claw. Lu Yin smiled and asked, Where's Zherlin? Zherbok pointed into the distance. Lu Yin looked over and saw Zherlin looking at him curiously. Beside her was a green-skinned fellow called Balarer, a weirdo who could stimulate plant attacks. Lu Yin raised a hand in greeting, but Balarer's face was filled with panic and his eyes were filled with fervor. Zherlin rolled her eyes at him, but she quickly recovered and looked at him nervously. Lu Yin laughed. This girl was still so interesting. Your Highness, you hid it from me for a long time. So you robbed her during Earth's trial, Zherbok complained. Lu Yin shrugged. You can't blame me for that, I forgot to tell you. She was the one who hid it from you. Zherbok grinned. Thank goodness, or I might have offended your Highness. On the other side, a rather powerful force quickly flew over, one that was on a completely different level from Zherbok's. Even though they were both Lemeters, the difference was huge. It was Schutz. Lu Yin had allowed him to return to the Great Yu Empire a long time ago to manage Yu Academy. During this time, the students of Yu Academy had grown stronger, and their fighting style had changed as well. They now relied more on star energy instead of relying on external forces. Schutz landed a few meters in front of Lu Yin. Greetings, Your Highness. Lu Yin looked at him apologetically. I'm sorry that you can't roam the Innerverse. Schutz's expression was solemn. It's my wish to return home. Lu Yin nodded and looked at him seriously. The Outerverse isn't the same as the Innerverse. The cultivation environment and resources are much worse. He then passed a cosmic ring to Schutz. Use the things here, I'll thank you on behalf of the Empire. Schutz didn't refuse and accepted the cosmic ring, standing silently to the side. Lu Yin gave Schutz 100 star essence, which was a huge sum. However, compared to Schutz's inability to roam the Innerverse, this amount wasn't much. Even if he was short on money, he wasn't unwilling to spend it. Schutz's cultivation talent wasn't high, but his ability to absorb battle experience was astonishing. If he could roam the Innerverse, he would definitely have a bright future as long as he didn't die. Lu Yin's compensation wasn't much. There were 5 Hall Masters in Yu Academy, and Lu Yin met with Zherbok and Schutz outside the tower. After chatting for a while, he headed to the other Hall Masters' residences. The first ring of the continent was huge, and he had to ask the blind monk to tear through the void and bring him around. Now the weather had changed and explorers could no longer tear through the void. Only hunters and above could do so. There were pros and cons. The good thing was that the destruction caused by battles wasn't as great as before, but the bad thing was that it wasn't as convenient for many people. Countless people were trying to find out the reason for this change, and some had even asked Lu Yin about it, but he didn't know. Not long after, Lu Yin appeared outside the formcast pool. The hall master here was Tianming, and Tianming was currently inside the pool. The formcast pool was very important, and there were space-exploring powerhouses overseeing it. When Lu Yin appeared, the two explorers immediately saluted him and Lu Yin dismissed them. He then looked at Tianming and felt that something was strange, as there was something off about Tianming's expression. "Sinner Tianming greets your highness, the royal regent." Tianming bowed to Lu Yin. Lu Yin was puzzled. "Sinner? What do you mean?" Tianming lowered his head and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, this sinner comes from Grand Top Weave, and according to the Empire's records he was an abandoned disciple of Grand Top Weave's 9-stack sect. However, this is fake." Lu Yin's eyes flashed as he stared at Tianming. Tianming looked up. This sinner was ordered by the 9-stack sect to steal the Sky Beast Claw. Lu Yin's brows rose, and behind him the blind monk's gaze turned cold. An enormous pressure suddenly appeared and pressed Tianming to the ground. Lu Yin waved his hand to disperse the pressure and looked at Tianming. "Why did you admit it? Even if you continue to hide it, no one will know. The 9-stack sect is already extinct." Tianming bitterly replied, "With the 9-stack sect around, this sinner had no choice but to steal the Sky Beast Claw due to promises and threats. However, now that the 9-stack sect is gone, this sinner no longer wishes to betray the Empire and is willing to confess." Lu Yin fell silent, as he had not expected to encounter such a scene in Yu Academy. Just as he had said, if Tianming did not say anything, no one would know that he was a spy. However, he had still admitted it, and his expression had not been fake. He truly did not wish to betray the Great Yu Empire. Just like how Lu Yin had developed feelings for Earth after spending some time there, Tianming had also developed feelings for the Great Yu Empire. If you had to choose between the Great Yu Empire and the 9-stack sect, which would you choose? Lu Yin asked in a low voice. Tianming did not hesitate. "The Great Yu Empire." "Why?" Lu Yin looked at him. Tianming solemnly replied, "In the 9-stack sect, I was just a loser who had never experienced any warmth. However, in the Great Yu Empire, I was highly valued and held the position of Yu Academy's hall master. I was even entrusted with the important task of guarding the formcast pool. This is a privilege that only the direct descendants of the 9-stack sect have. This sinner has no attachment to the 9-stack sect." Lu Yin looked into Tianming's eyes. He was trying to determine if Tianming was sincere or if he had made this choice because the 9-stack sect had been destroyed and he had no other choice. In the end, Lu Yin forgave Tianming. It was not that he trusted Tianming, but rather that he had other uses for him. The 9-stack sect was the leading power in Grand Top Weave, and Tianming was a disciple there. Lu Yin wanted to use Tianming as a key to opening Grand Top Weave. He could not act rashly, or else he would become a bandit in the eyes of others. If he wanted to plunder Grand Top Weave's resources, he needed a suitable reason. He could not be like those enlighters who represented the Great Yu Empire in a power. Tianming was still a hall master of Yu Academy, but Lu Yin had punished him by not allowing him to take a single step out of the academy. Tianming gratefully accepted the punishment. Here Lu Yin saw a few faces from Earth. One of them was a young man named Fu Xiaoxu who had a pretty good innate gift. He was an illusionist, which reminded Lu Yin of Zhou Knight's legendary battle technique, Night's End, Daybreak. Of course, Fu Xiaoxu's illusions could not compare to Night's End, Daybreak, but if Fu Xiaoxu could one day become an enlighter, then his illusions would still be very terrifying. Night's End, Daybreak allowed Lu Yin to see the ultimate power of illusions. He patted Fu Xiaoxu's shoulder and encouraged him, saying, "When you cultivate illusions to the end, you won't be able to create illusions, but rather you'll sink into them. Even if you know that it's an illusion, you'll still sink into it and you won't be able to escape." These words shocked Fu Xiaoxu, and the way he looked at Lu Yin changed. He almost knelt down and kowtowed to Lu Yin, calling him master. Lu Yin had successfully acted, which made the monkey sigh in admiration. "Seventh bro, I've realized that you're becoming more and more like an expert." The monkey sighed. "Cut the crap. When are you breaking through?" Lu Yin asked. The monkey replied, "I'll wait for another 2 days. 2 days at most." Lu Yin had the blind monk take him to Huozhong's residence, where he saw many familiar faces. Huansha and Xianxia were both there. The Hua family was from Earth and they took special care of Earthlings, so it was normal for them to be here. When Lu Yin had first applied to learn the Sky Beast Claw, Hua Zhong had immediately agreed. Lu Yin had found it strange as he had offended Hua Shaoling. Now everything made sense. Unfortunately, Feng Hong was not around as he had gone out to train. Luo Yi had also gone out to train. Chapter 537. Lu Yin had an impression of Qin Xian. She was a researcher in Jinlin and one of the captains. She had supported Zhou Xian and had been very wary of Lu Yin back then, but he had never expected her to awaken an innate gift. Huan Sha had also awakened an innate gift: simulation analysis. Lu Yin was confused when he heard the name as he didn't understand it at all. Huan Sha explained, simulation analysis can analyze dozens or even hundreds of situations in one's mind at the same time. Combining all the information one has, one can obtain the most accurate data as quickly as possible. Hua Zhong spoke up. Your Highness, Huan Sha has caught the eye of Captain Banjiu and is about to be recruited into the 12th Squadron. No, she can't go, Lu Yin immediately rejected. Under everyone's doubtful gazes, he fervently looked at Huan Sha. Can anything be analyzed? In theory, as long as there's data, Huan Sha replied. This wasn't her first time meeting Lu Yin. They had met back on Earth but they hadn't interacted much. She was still very curious about him and of course she wanted to know where Zhang Dingtian was. Like Zhao Yu, she had come to Yu Academy to look for Zhang Dingtian. Lu Yin looked at Huan Sha in admiration. I remember now. You were the one who helped Zhang Dingtian deal with matters back in the capital on Earth. Huan Sha's eyes lit up. Does your Highness know where Zhang Dingtian is? Lu Yin nodded. I met him in the Innerverse. He's doing well. Huan Sha relaxed. That's good, that's good. Lu Yin looked her up and down. If you can help Zhang Dingtian deal with matters, then you can help me as well. How about it? I'm now formally inviting you to join the Lu Ministry of Staff and help me deal with matters handed in by the ministers. Huan Sha, Hua Zhong and the others were stunned. Dealing with matters of the Great Yu Empire was equivalent to wielding power. How could he just give it to someone else so casually? And what was the Lu Ministry of Staff? They had never heard of it before. The Lu Ministry of Staff is a new department that I've established. It specializes in dealing with matters that aren't too important. Don't worry, it won't be too troublesome. The important matters will be sent to the cabinet ministers. How about it? Huan Sha fell silent. She didn't want to join the 12th Squadron either. Dealing with matters was her specialty, or she wouldn't have been valued by Zhang Dingtian back then. Furthermore, she needed to be close to the center of power to get close to Lu Yin and find Zhang Dingtian's whereabouts. Thank you, Your Highness, Sha replied respectfully. Lu Yin nodded and was rather delighted, as he had finally found someone to help him deal with government affairs. The mountain of memorials was giving him a headache. Of course, just as he had said, the important government affairs were all handed over to the cabinet ministers, and Huan Sha's authority was limited. Furthermore, the cabinet ministers had the authority to temporarily restrict the members of the Lu Ministry of Staff. Only when Lu Yin confirmed that Huan Sha had no ill intentions and that she had the ability to do so would he remove the restrictions on the Ministry of Staff's authority. For the time being, Huan Sha was just someone who helped him deal with the miscellaneous items. Assist. He tyrannically announced the establishment of the Lu Ministry of Staff, and he had even chosen the location, King Zishan's palace. He wanted to observe Huan Sha for as long as possible to determine her ability and loyalty. Sure enough, after the news of the establishment of the Lu Ministry of Staff spread, it was immediately opposed by many ministers, especially the cabinet ministers. They felt that their power was being dispersed. Lu Yin did not take the call. That was how he did things. Since he had started something, he would see it through to the end. There was no reason for him to take it back. Aside from Sha Huan, Lu Yin also saw a young man named Song Shi, who looked at him with adoration. Lu Yin was pleased, and with a wave of his hand he decided to bring a few people to Earth. He wanted to see Earth, which was very important to him, and he also wanted to investigate Jupiter. While Lu Yin had his subordinates prepare a large spacecraft for him to head to Earth, He had the blind monk tear through the void and bring him to the Anna family's residence. Lu Yin had not seen Jenny Anna since the bride kidnapping incident in East San Dios, and he felt guilty towards her. Jenny Anna's words kept popping up in his mind. Was it wrong to pursue love? Yes, humans were selfish and the wrong thing to do was to stand on the wrong side. News of Lu Yin's appearance alarmed the Anna family, and Zhou Xian Anna hurriedly appeared to welcome him. He did not even dare to tear through the void and instead jogged over. Rocky Anna, Tori Anna, and the rest of the Anna family were all present. Greetings, Your Highness. Everyone bowed. Lu Yin raised a hand to dismiss them, leaving Zhou Xian Anna behind while everyone else withdrew. Your Highness, if there's anything you need, just give the order. We wouldn't dare to trouble you to come personally, Zhou Xian Anna said respectfully. His attitude was 100 times more respectful than the last time they had met. Previously he had been respectful towards Lu Yin because of his status, but now it was because of his strength. After all, Lu Yin had insta-killed an enlighter. As a veteran hunter, Zhou Xian Anna was well aware of how terrifying an enlighter was. The fact that this young man in front of him had insta-killed an enlighter terrified him, and he did not dare to be impudent. He was also glad that he had made the right decision. You're saying the same thing as Uncle Hua. Why can't I come? Lu Yin smiled. Zhou Xian Anna hurriedly replied, of course you can. The great Yu Empire belongs to you, Your Highness, so the small Anna family naturally belongs to you as well. Lu Yin was increasingly experiencing the thrill of being high above others and the superiority of power. Every time he saw Zhou Xian Anna, the man's attitude changed. This was the fundamental reason why everyone pursued power and power. It was too addictive. How's she doing? Lu Yin asked. Zhou Xian Anna knew who Lu Yin was referring to and his expression changed. She's fine. She doesn't leave her room. Lu Yin fully activated his domain and saw Jenny Anna. Compared to the dazzling beauty he had seen in East San Dios, the current Jenny Anna seemed to have aged by 10 years. There's no need to put her under house arrest. She can go wherever she wants. The world has changed, so there's no need to care about anything else. Zhou Xian Anna nodded. I understand. Thank you, Your Highness. Lu Yin looked at Zhou Xian Anna. What about the person from the Royal Frost Continent? He's still sealed in ice. Don't worry, Your Highness. Once he wakes up, I'll immediately contact you, Zhou Xian Anna said. When Lu Yin had attacked Fire's Melt Planet, an expert from Fire's Melt Planet had sealed himself in ice after the planet had been destroyed. Zhou Xian Anna had confirmed that he was from the Royal Frost Continent, which was why Lu Yin had recognized Che Han during the Sea King's son-in-law selection. Lu Yin nodded and then left. Zhou Xian Anna only relaxed after Lu Yin had left. The Anna family's attitude had wavered, and Zhou Xian Anna had been afraid that Lu Yin would seek revenge later. Fortunately, nothing had happened. In outer space, a large spacecraft headed north. Lu Yin was aboard along with a group of cultivators from Earth. Hai Chi-Chi had not tagged along as she had stayed behind on Xenu Star. To these cultivators, this was a return home in glory. Lu Yin had concealed his identity and headed to Earth to investigate Jupiter's situation. He felt that the hidden Earth Society might have information that he needed, and he might even be able to pry into the secrets of the primeval surnames from them. After a period of interstellar travel, Earth came into view. It was still that familiar azure planet, and Lu Yin's eyes were filled with reminiscence. He had many beautiful memories here, memories of being an ordinary person who stood aloof from worldly affairs. He had stayed on Earth for 2 years, which was more than the time he had spent with Big Sis and the others. He had already gotten used to life there, and to someone without memories, that was everything. However, this trial had changed everything. A space station had been built on Earth, and spacecraft would pass by from time to time. To the Great Yu Empire, Earth had a special status because it was the home of the royal regent. It wasn't just the Great Yu Empire. People from other places in the Frostwave Weave would visit Earth from time to time. Even people from Grand Top Weave and the surrounding weaves would occasionally visit Earth. Lu Yin's fame in the universe was so great that even the Outerverse could not bear it. He was the strongest Lemiter, and this was an honor that the Outerverse had never received before. Inside the spacecraft, Fu Xiaoshu Songshi and the rest looked at Earth with excitement. They had been away from Earth for quite some time, and although it had not been long, they felt as if they had been away for a very long time. Now that they had returned home in glory, they could not wait to reunite with their friends and family. Lu Yin looked outside Earth and towards a yellowish-brown planet. It was Jupiter, a gaseous planet where the hidden Earth society was hidden. Lu Yin's eyes filled with star energy as he looked at Jupiter, and he immediately saw an enormous number of rune lines. Lu Yin was shocked as the number of rune lines exceeded that of Xianxia and Xianxia. However, although there were a lot of rune lines, they were not concentrated together. This proved that there was more than one hunter on Jupiter, but there was no one close to being an enlighter. Lu Yin relaxed. As long as there were no enlighters, everything would be fine. He looked at all of the planets around Earth and he discovered that aside from Jupiter, all of the other planets were normal and there were no signs of any powerhouses. Zhou Yu walked out from the spacecraft and saw Lu Yin. The next moment, Lu Yin covered himself in universal armor and stepped out of the spacecraft, heading towards Jupiter. Zhou Yu was envious as even with universal armor she would not be able to fly freely in outer space. Jupiter was enormous and its exterior was composed of gas. Earth had studied its interior for many years, but even Earth itself had not been able to fully understand it, let alone Jupiter. The Great Yu Empire had the technology but they were not interested. Lu Yin donned his universal armor and appeared outside of Jupiter. He quietly looked at the planet and saw an enormous number of rune lines approaching him from the other side of the planet. The hidden Earth Society had discovered him. Lu Yin requesting entry. Lu Yin called out from outer space, his voice echoing through the void towards Jupiter. There was no response from Jupiter. The rune lines that were approaching him should have come from a hunter. At this moment that hunter was definitely looking at him, but he was not paying any attention to him. Lu Yin called out a few more times but it was still the same. The hunter did not even move. Lu Yin frowned. Xianxia had said that he could not enter Jupiter either, as there were ancient defenses left behind on the planet. However, Lu Yin could not see through them. He decided to force his way in and pulled out his gun. Chapter 538. Perhaps it had sensed the threat, but the next moment Jupiter changed. A giant vortex formed on the planet's surface, and Lu Yin was shocked to discover that the number of rune lines on the planet had increased without limit. It had far surpassed a hunter's and it had even surpassed Karthika's. Lu Yin hurriedly retreated and sized up Jupiter in shock. It was just as Xianxia had said. Jupiter really did have some ancient defensive measures that surpassed an enlighter's, and they might even be able to block powerhouses with power levels above 300,000. Lu Yin could not break in with his current strength. Uncle Hua, I've arrived at Jupiter. Lu Yin activated his gadget and contacted Xianxia. Xianxia asked, Your Highness, can you enter? Lu Yin fell silent. Your Highness, the Hidden Earth Society has watched Earth's civilization develop and decline for countless years, but they have never interfered. They only wish to preserve the ancient secrets. Anyone who leaves Jupiter will never be able to return, and the same goes for me. It's impossible for you to enter, and it's also impossible for you to communicate with them, Xianxia said. Lu Yin looked at Jupiter unwillingly. The secret of the primeval surnames was right in front of him. Was he going to give up now? Your Highness, there have always been people from the Hidden Earth organization on Earth. Like me, that person will never be able to return. That person's mission is to find talented children and send them to Jupiter. Perhaps that person will know more than me, said Xianxia. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. How do we find that person? I don't know. Ever since I left Jupiter, I have never asked about the Hidden Earth Society, and they have never contacted me. Although I have the symbol of the society, I am no longer a member of the society, Xianxia said helplessly. Lu Yin looked at Jupiter helplessly. It was like a giant tortoise shell, and this group of people was forever holed up inside. It was truly troublesome. He had no way to threaten this organization. Expose them? After countless years, he believed that the culprit who had destroyed Earth must have known about the Hidden Earth Society's existence. He did not believe that this organization could remain hidden forever, and exposing them would not be a threat. Furthermore, even if the culprit knew, he could not do anything about it. This organization was like a dead pig that did not fear boiling water. I am Lu Yin and I have the primeval surname. I wish to abide by the ancient agreement, so please allow me to enter. Lu Yin shouted. The hunter did not move. Lu Yin pursed his lips. Earth's civilization has been destroyed many times. Do you plan to hide it forever? I, Lu Yin, am confident that I am an unparalleled Lamiter, and I will shake the universe. You must also show some sincerity. No one bothered with him. Do you guys want to be cowards forever? Lu Yin shouted. Still no one bothered with him. Lu Yin was speechless. Seventh bro, this group of people can even watch as their homeworld was destroyed, so how could they be moved by just a few words from you? I think that you might as well look for that hidden Earth organization from Earth. Although it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, at least there's a needle for you to find, the monkey said. Lu Yin shook his head. If that person is able to hide on Earth, then that means that his strength is average. He might not even know as much as Xianxia. That's true. It's a primeval surname, Since ancient times, the human domain has been hunting down those with primeval surnames. It's very strange, the monkey said. Lu Yin's eyes twitched. What do you know? I don't know. Although a powerhouse's notes have mentioned primeval surnames, there's no secret about them. I suggest that you start with the Lockbreaker Society. I remember reading a note from a human powerhouse that was filled with resentment towards the Lockbreaker Society. That powerhouse had a primeval surname Wang. He had no legal status and his lock-breaking talent was extraordinary, but he was unable to join the Lockbreaker Society, the monkey said. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. That's right, he had forgotten that the Lockbreaker Society had a rule that stated that those with a primeval surname could not join. This rule had never been broken, and since they had such a rule, it meant that they had some understanding of the primeval surnames. Since he could not find a way to break through this hidden Earth organization, then the Lockbreaker Society was another option. The Innerverse and Outerverse were separated, but there were still Lockbreaker Society branches in the Outerverse, so perhaps he could find something. It seemed like it was time for another round of lockbreaking so that he could reach the perceptive intermediate as soon as possible and enter the upper echelons of the society. Lu Yin looked at Jupiter. You guys can hole up forever. Sooner or later, that culprit will be able to break through Jupiter's defenses. At that time you guys will also be exterminated. Don't come begging me for help then. The hunter on Jupiter did not move, nor did he seem to have any intention of speaking to Lu Yin. Just as Lu Yin was about to return to Earth, the monkey suddenly said, "Seventh bro, I'm about to break through. Quick, let's find a place." Lu Yin looked around and then took out a collapsible spacecraft. He boarded it and instantly arrived at Neptune. He donned his armor and said to the monkey, "Break through." The monkey's figure floated out of Lu Yin's right arm. If anyone else saw this, they would definitely be frightened out of their wits. The monkey had been stuck at the Lamiter realm for a very long time. Back then Lu Yin had only been a melder, but now the monkey had reached the critical point. Lu Yin looked at the monkey strangely. It was strange that a phantom that had been branded onto his body could break through without needing any star essence. He had forgotten to ask Kuang Wang if their tamed beasts had this ability as well. Astral beasts were different from humans in that they did not need formcast models to break through. Some astral beasts could become explorers as soon as they matured. It was very easy for the monkey to break through to the explorer realm, as all he had to do was release it and let it roam around. There was no movement at all, which made Lu Yin wonder if the monkey was just toying with him. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed as he watched the monkey's figure fuse back into his right arm. "You broke through." "Yes, I did." The monkey was pleased with himself. Lu Yin frowned. "You really broke through? Why didn't I feel anything?" The monkey's figure floated out, and a powerful fluctuation swept across the area as it looked at Lu Yin proudly. His speed was not slow, and no one could tell that he was moving because the monkey was a shadow. It was very convenient to hide in his shadow. Lu Yin was dragged along by the monkey towards Earth. Outside of Earth, the Great Yu Empire's army quickly discovered Lu Yin's tracks, and they stared at him in shock as he leisurely floated through outer space. Wasn't the royal regent a Lamiter? How was he able to roam outer space? Had the royal regent broken through? Lu Yin did not encounter any obstructions, and he directly entered Earth's atmosphere before landing above the ocean. After determining the direction, he headed towards Jinling in China. He wanted to meet an old acquaintance. Because of Lu Yin, Earth had changed greatly, and many people had embarked on the path of cultivation. Because Lu Yin had once cultivated in Jinling, the Great Yu Empire had specially set up a cultivation school in the suburbs of the city. The headmaster of the school was Zhou Xian, but he was essentially an honorary headmaster. All of the cultivation resources of the school were controlled by people sent by the Great Yu Empire. After several years of development, not only had the zombies been cleared out, but Jinling had also become much more prosperous than before. Aircraft could now roam the skies, and there were even more people on the ground who were clearly different from those on Earth. Chapter 539. Lu Yin stepped onto the soil of Nanjing and sighed. Things had remained the same for 5 years, but the people had changed. The desperate situation from before had completely changed, and Nanjing now looked like a city on a bustling planet. He released his domain to search for Zhou Xian, and his gaze quickly locked onto Zhou Xian. Back when Earth had ended, Zhou Xian had been one of the 7 sages and had been in charge of Nanjing. He had settled down in Zhongshan and was in charge of 80,000 cultivators. Although Nanjing had returned to its former glory, Zhongshan was still the same. Lu Yin appeared in Zhongshan without concealing his presence. Within Zhongshan, dozens of people stared blankly at the screen as Lu Yin leisurely entered the mountain. One of them trembled as he asked, "Why does this person look so familiar?" "Xavier Lu Yin. He's Lu Yin, the Great Yu Empire's royal regent." Another exclaimed. Soon, everyone grew excited and someone immediately reported to Zhou Xian. Because Lu Yin had defeated Qingyu, he had been hailed as the savior of Earth. Zhou Xian and the others had greatly exaggerated his achievements, and Lu Yin had a large number of fanatical worshippers on Earth. The Great Yu Empire's army on Earth had also cooperated with the propaganda, causing Lu Yin to become a god in the hearts of almost everyone on Earth. The Astral Combat Tournament had imprinted his image in the hearts of everyone on Earth, and the Tournament of the Strongest had made him a true god. Lu Yin himself did not know how much influence he had on Earth. All of Zhongshan's troops quickly gathered, and the entire city of Nanjing sounded an alarm that shocked 1,000,000 people. Everyone looked at Zhongshan in confusion. Was there an enemy? Lu Yin looked up and laughed. He knew that he had been discovered. Within his domain, many people were looking at him fervently. He was in no hurry to leave, as his current location was exactly where he had stayed when he had first used a formcast model to embark on the path of cultivation. This was where he had rolled his die and obtained the serious art. It was also here that his path to becoming a legend had begun for countless people on Earth. This place had long since been cordoned off and no one was allowed to enter, with only a few exceptions. Lu Yin even saw the tent that he had stayed in for 5 years, and it had not changed at all. He sighed ruefully. It was worth it to entrust his emotions to Earth. Although this place had given him a weakness, he was willing to bear it. Zhou Xian appeared in the sky and descended while laughing maniacally. Lu Yin looked at him with a smile. Zhou Xian, commander of Earth's Jinlin Defense Force. Greetings, Your Highness. Zhou Xian immediately bowed and Lu Yin smiled as he supported him. Do you need this? Zhou Xian laughed heartily. You can't ignore the etiquette, but after you perform this etiquette, you can let go of your status as the regent. You're just an earthling now. That's right, I'm an earthling. Lu Yin was very happy. Returning to Earth and seeing old acquaintances gave him a warm feeling. This was a feeling that could not be experienced anywhere else. Perhaps it could only be experienced when he was with Big Sis and the others, but it was a different kind of feeling altogether. Lu Yin didn't have many acquaintances on Earth. The 2 years before the apocalypse had been very dull, and he didn't have many friends to talk to. Zhou Xian was one of his few friends, and although they hadn't spent much time together, he had been of great help to Lu Yin. After chatting with Zhou Xian for a while, Lu Yin noticed that many people had gathered around them through his domain, and they were all looking at him with fanatical gazes. Lu Yin was not used to such fanatical gazes. Was he really that popular? Even when he had defeated Qingyu and saved Earth, that had been 5 years ago. At this time, Lu Yin saw a little girl in his domain. She looked to be about 2 or 3 years old and bore a slight resemblance to Zhou Xian. He looked at Zhou Xian with a strange expression. You have a daughter? Zhou Xian was stunned. How did you know? Lu Yin smiled. I saw her. How about it? Do you have a formcast model? Zhou Xian was embarrassed. Someone gave one to me but I didn't accept it. Why? Are you afraid that people will say you took bribes? Lu Yin joked. Zhou Xian replied seriously. Everyone in the empire knows that you're from Earth and you have some sort of relationship with me. If I took bribes you'd be the one losing face. Lu Yin tossed a crystal card to Zhou Xian. There's some money in here, enough to buy a formcast model. Don't reject it, just treat it as a gift from me to your daughter. By the way, what's her name? Zhou Xian smiled as he accepted the card. He's called Cici Zhou Cici. Not a bad name. It means hope and she was born in an era of peace. Not bad. If there's a chance in the future, send her to Academy to study. For cultivators, a few decades pass in the blink of an eye. Zhou Xian nodded. He knew that the gap between him and Lu Yin was too great. Even if they had once been friends, their friendship would be gone once he died. He wasn't stupid, and while he didn't accept bribes, he was still willing to use his relationship with Lu Yin as long as it was reasonable. Otherwise, he wouldn't have accepted the position of honorary principal. He had always wanted to send his daughter to Xinyu Star, and with Lu Yin's words, it was much more stable. There was a saying that when one reached the Tao, even his friends and dogs would ascend to the heavens. For those who reached the Tao, the benefits they provided were also emotional sustenance. Not only would their friends and family benefit, but they would also benefit themselves. Zhou Xian was special to Lu Yin because he was the first sentinel he had met. After the final battle on Earth, Zhang Dingtian and Bai Shui had left with Lu Yin. Lu Xiaoge had left with Qingyu, while Wang Yu and Tong Zhan had been killed by Lu Xiaoge. Only Zhou Xian and Wu Xing had stayed behind. Lu Yin wasn't familiar with Wu Xing, so he didn't look for him. Zhao Yu and the others who had followed Lu Yin to Earth had been given a break, and they could spread the news of Academy's situation back on Earth. Lu Yin wouldn't leave with them either. He took a collapsible spacecraft and headed straight back to Xinyu Star. Jupiter was like a thorn that had pierced into his heart. He didn't have the ability to deal with it now, but he would definitely find a way to deal with it in the future. He also wanted to use the Hidden Earth Society to uncover the secrets of the primeval surnames. On the way back to Xinyu Star, Lu Yin had planned to recite the Stonewall scriptures, but not long after leaving Earth, his gadget rang. It was Madame Naylan. Lu Yin was surprised. He hadn't contacted her in a long time. Hello, Madame Naylan. Lu Yin opened his gadget and greeted the beautiful Madame Naylan on the screen. Not only had the innerverse and outerverse been cut off, but many weaves in the outerverse had also been cut off. The network signal was intermittent, but Madame Naylan's image was still very clear on the screen. This proved that her current location wasn't separated from Frostwave Weave, and she shouldn't be too far away. Long time no see, Student Lu. Your name has been ringing in my ears all this time and it's hard not to hear it. Madame Naylan smiled. She had only put on a little makeup, but her charm was enough to cause Lu Yin's heart to flutter even through the screen. What a vixen, Lu Yin thought to himself. It's my fault. I shouldn't have disturbed Madame's peace. Madame Naylan giggled. Then how do you plan on compensating me? Lu Yin felt awkward. This vixen really knew how to continue the conversation. Madame Naylan looked at Lu Yin's awkward expression with interest and smiled. Student Lu, we're friends, right? Lu Yin nodded. When he thought about how rich the Naylan family was, he immediately replied, we're very good friends. Then if a friend is in trouble, will you help? Madame Naylan asked with an aggrieved expression and a trace of helplessness. Even though he knew that she was faking it, Lu Yin still could not bear it. Did something happen to the Naylan family? Madame Naylan sighed. The innerverse and outerverse have been separated, and the Sword Sect, which was once our backer, can no longer be relied on. Not long ago the four major corporations of Tyrannical Weave met, but due to the great changes in the universe, Tyrannical Weave was almost completely isolated. An enlighter from my Naylan family was trapped in Tyrannical Weave, and now my Naylan family no longer has an enlighter to protect them. Lu Yin was shocked. You guys already met? Madame Naylan's eyes flashed and she looked at Lu Yin. Student Lu, do you know about the meeting between the four major corporations? I've heard about it, Lu Yin replied. He had heard about it from Lu Xiaoge, who had told him the location of the meeting but had not confirmed the time. He had not expected the meeting to have already taken place, and it had probably happened while he was trapped in the Sea King's dome. Madame Nayland smiled. Looks like Student Lu has a lot of connections. Although the meeting between the 4 major corporations is not a secret, very few people are qualified to know about it. Most of them are in the business circle, so how did Student Lu find out? Is that important? Luyin asked. Nayland Yao's expression became aggrieved once again. That's right, it's not important anymore. Right now, my Nayland family is the best cake for the Enlighters left behind in the Outerverse. Out of the 4 major corporations, my Nayland family is the closest to these Enlighters. Student Lu, can you help me? Lu Yin was puzzled. I remember that the Sword Sect has an Enlighter elder outside. Madame Nayland smiled bitterly. My surname is Lu, and although the Sword Sect is controlled by the Lu family, there are still many people who are unhappy with the Lu family. This elder Viletree who was left behind in the Outerverse is one of them. He won't care about the Nayland family's survival. Lu Yin understood. The stronger a power was, the more serious the internal disputes would be, which was normal. Student Lu, I know what it means to ask you to protect the Nayland family. Right now, those Enlighters are crazily plundering resources, and my Nayland family is the most tempting to them. Protecting us means becoming enemies with many Enlighters, but I really have no other choice. Madame Nayland pursed her lips and looked at Lu Yin pitifully. Lu Yin's heart swayed once again. Too tempting. It's not just the Nayland family, you're also very tempting. He wanted to say this, but he felt that it would be inappropriate. If Student Lu is willing to protect the Nayland family, then my Nayland family is willing to help the Great Yu Empire recover its economy. We'll also provide the Great Yu Empire with military funds to unify Frostwave Weave and even conquer other weaves, Madame Nayland said solemnly. Lu Yin was tempted as the Nayland family was too rich. If Madame Nayland was willing to provide him with resources, then he was confident that he could raise the gun's attack power by several levels. He might even be able to threaten old freaks with a power level of 300,000. To the Outerverse, a power level of 300,000 was definitely the limit. At that time he would be practically invincible in the Outerverse. Furthermore, he also had the money bomb, progenitor Wuxiang's hide, and his universal armor. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.